Welcome back to Geeks and Grounds, a monthly game club where we play games and brew good conversation together.
I'm Joel Thomas.
And I'm Jenny Wyndham, and I'm excited for Black Forest Ghetto.
I'm excited for Fluffy Cat Deep Dive in Space.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm ready. We've been playing A Space for the Unbound this month, and it's been very fun.
Yes, really enjoying it. Hopefully you got to catch our interview with one of the creative director earlier, I think 2 weeks ago. It's been really fun getting to play this game and dive in.
Oh my gosh, Space Dive In. I have 2 more weeks, or I guess the time of this recording, 1 more week for that joke to have its moment, and then I can retire it. Every time I say the word dive, I always am like, space.
Space dive. Yeah, makes sense.
Right beforehand. But yeah, how are you doing this week, Joel?
It has been a good week to be playing a game about high school angst, just based on things happening in my own personal life. I listened to some old dashboard confessional emo music on the drive over here today.
Yes,
I am in the mood to talk about high school feelings and the bigness of them.
Yeah, high school feelings were really big. I had a lot of feelings that did not know where to go when I was in high school, and they were just, and then I was just a weird kid, and so they came out in very weird ways. Like, oh man, the kids these days don't really make mixtapes. They make playlists now.
Yeah.
But the mixtapes and the burn CDs I would make to convey my feelings to no one in particular, just myself. Oh my gosh. It was I need to find those again.
I don't think you want to. I found a massive CD wallet from my high school days and had a bunch of my burn CDs, and I was listening to it, and I was basically think Tony Hawk Pro Skater and then evolve one step beyond that, and that was
that
the entire
great.
Except for it was badly burned from bad LimeWire downloads.
Napster.
I think someone in the Discord was talking about their own MP3 experiences back in the day.
Yeah, which honestly, if we're talking internet savvy, I feel like at least from our age group and generation, we learned a lot of media and internet savvy by having to download. We didn't have to. By downloading music and movies and clips and things from Napster, LimeWire, all of those torrent sites. Yeah.
I had kind of a shocking moment. I went to an emo night here at one of our local clubs a couple months back, and they played a bunch of songs that I did not know. And I thought I was pretty steeped in the emo screamo scene.
Yeah.
But I thought back and I was like, this was back during the days of CDs. And if you didn't have the CD and your friend didn't have the CD, there really was no way to access that music. And so I guess I shouldn't be that surprised. But yeah, it was a whole world of music that I had no idea existed that apparently was very popular.
That's amazing. Well, now you can go back and rediscover all of that.
Yeah, but I can't remember the names of any of the bands. So.
No.
What do you bring into the grounds this week?
Oh man, work has been pretty wild this week. We have a game launching as of this recording day in 10 days. So that's a really big deal. I'm really excited about it. We've had a little bit, reviewing, sending out keys before a game is launched means you're sending out a build that is maybe not quite done. So people are playing a game that still maybe has a few patches needed, still needs a few little tweaks and, adjustments to make it perfect for consumer purchase. And so we're in the midst of that and all of those final fixes and getting things ready and perfect as we can for folks to play, which is both exciting and stressful.
Important reminder for all of you at home, Jenny works in games. And I'm your casual person that's a stand-in for people that are kind of wait, did I even do the puzzle that you guys are talking about? That's what I'm bringing to the conversation.
No. You are totally not a stand-in. You are proficient at games. You are a capital G gamer. We're retaking that term.
And if you are listening to this, you are too.
Yeah. We're all gamers.
Yeah.
We're gonna take that word back. I feel like there's a negative connotation and I'm no.
I don't know that I want the word back.
That's true.
Oh boy.
But yeah, we both got we brewed the coffee from the first
Yes,
week.
we had it. Okay, we know it's bad practice to be drinking grounds that are a month old.
You know what? I don't care. It's still coffee. It's still tasty. I'm still excited about it.
Perhaps more important than what we're drinking is how we're drinking it. Let's do a little zoom in here.
Oh my gosh.
We're talking about cats today, y'all.
Yeah.
So we
have
got cat mugs.
For folks who are listening to the podcast version, not watching the YouTube version, we just held up our cat mugs. I've got just an assortment of cat faces.
It's like
on
Art Deco cat.
Yeah.
Mine
like,
is straight Hello Kitty. So
very, very good.
Hopefully you all have your mugs. You're ready to dig in with us today. We're excited to talk about a space for the Unbound.
Mm-hmm. Wait, are we going to do a cheers?
Oh, we should do a cheers.
We should do a cheers.
Oh, I hope that was a satisfying sound for those of you listening to our cups clink.
Our ASMR portion of...
We would like for you to enjoy
No.
the sound of our cups clink, 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 clink.
You just hit the mic.
I'm not an ASMR person. I mean, as in, like, I don't know how to do it. So,
yeah.
I'm here to talk about games today.
Me too. I'm excited to talk about a space for the Unbound. If you could quickly bring us in and intro what is this game for anyone who may not be familiar with it?
Yes. Allow me to read just a very quick synopsis. High school is ending, and the world is ending with it. A Space for the Unbound is a slice-of-life adventure game that tells a story about overcoming anxiety, depression, and the relationship between a boy and a girl with supernatural powers. Follow two high school sweethearts, Atma and Raya, on a journey of self-discovery at the end of their high school years. When a mysteriously supernatural power is suddenly unleashed, threatening their existence, they must explore and investigate their town to uncover hidden secrets, face the end of the world, and perhaps learn more about each other. Set in small town inspired by 90s-era rural Indonesia, A Space for the Unbound presents an endearing story-driven experience with a vibrant environment waiting to be explored. It's coming from Toge Productions and Mojiken Studios.
Yep.
And it just came out in January of 2023, so this is a relatively new game if you haven't had a chance to dive in. Space dive.
Before we hop into the bulk of the podcast, just a few housekeeping details. This is a discussion of the entire game. So we are going to go from top to bottom, diving into the plot, the themes, connections that we made, things we loved, things we didn't love, and we're excited to share our thoughts with you. With that being said, you mentioned in the synopsis, there are heavy themes this game approaches. Anxiety, depression, lots of struggles that for some folks may be more challenging to listen to and think about than others. So we encourage you to take a look at geeksandgrounds.com /this month's brew. You can click on the game itself and see a list of full content warnings that go into a lot of more specific detail. But if, you are sensitive to any of these topics, or you find yourself thinking that you may need to get some help or struggle as you're listening to it, please also check out the resources that we've linked in the description of this podcast or in the video if you're watching on YouTube.
Yeah, and actually, I think I'm going to call back to the last podcast where we interviewed Dimas, and he talked about how they actually had a therapist on staff as a part of this game. And I don't know, for those of you playing the game, maybe you felt like, and that or maybe also in therapy, as I was playing through, I was like, oh, I'm seeing a lot of the things my therapist talks to me about being said to me right now in this video game. So hopefully, I think we'll probably dig into that a bit, but I think just to be very clear, like, very heavy topics, but I think they handled them with a high degree of grace, considering like where we are today in 2023 and what we know about how to deal with these things.
Yeah, absolutely. And as someone who has hopped onto the therapy train playing this game, I replayed it, and when I was replaying it, that's when I started up therapy, and I was just like, ooh. There was a lot. And even before, it was super impactful. So yeah, I think let's get into it. It's time to get started with the game.
The prologue.
Dun dun dun.
Okay, what were some of your thoughts as you were like getting into the game at the beginning? What were some of the things that stood out to you?
I mean, the immediate reaction is this is a beautiful game. The pixel art is crisp and stunning. It feels like I'm in a pixel art anime. I wanted to be in this world. I immediately loved the two characters of Atma and Nirmala. Something about them just the relationship they have, the friendship they have was so charming to me. I wanted to know more. I want to know how they became friends, how they started writing this fairy tale together, and just I wanted to be their friend. I thought this was a really lovely place to kick off our journey.
I totally agree. Excuse me. I think it's interesting as well. You don't really learn much about Atma in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
You just know he's friends with Nirmala. He's supportive. You are playing as Atma, as that's
Mm-hmm.
the character that you are playing as the player. And you're running around. You're like, oh, I'm going to help this little girl write this story, and
Yep.
you encounter a really intense moment with her dad that made my stomach clench and immediately took me
Yeah.
back to some of that like childhood fear when you have like a really angry parent in the house.
Yeah.
So they let you know up front the type of emotional
Mm-hmm.
experiences that you can expect to have.
Mm-hmm.
But through most of the game, uh, you don't learn anything about Atma. You don't learn
No.
about who he is, about his background. He wakes up after this like prologue with no memory.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that Dimas said in the last interview is that he really wanted Atma to feel like the stand-in for you, the
Mm-hmm.
gamer, which I thought was like a really interesting way to do that.
Yeah, I really liked it. And it was intriguing because the whole time you're thinking Atma has been like he is a person who has been in this village. Why does he not remember certain things?
Mm-hmm.
Why do certain
Mm-hmm.
people not really remember him? And so there is a lot of mystery and elements throughout the game as you start playing where you realize things don't quite add up and you can't really put your finger on it. And I
Yeah.
love that because uh, I love that when it's followed through, I guess.
Yeah.
In a lot of games or media, what will happen is some of the mystery will crop up throughout and you don't really get a solid answer. And what I'm excited about is that I do think Space for the Unbound gives answers to the questions that you have throughout your playtime.
I agree.
Yes.
And I also think they insert some intentionally misleading
Oh,
things in the
yeah, yeah.
prologue to really throw you off the trail.
Yes.
So before as we were prepping for today, I took a ton of screenshots. I think I had like 200 screenshots from the games I was playing through it. This is not like a super long game. It was like what, 10 hours or something
Yeah.
like that. And I was going through them and I found there's a piece of dialogue in the opening prologue. You're like talking
Mm-hmm.
to a woman who's reading a newspaper and she says, "Looks like the world is going to end soon." In my opinion, I think they are setting us up to identify there is a literal end to the physical world that is coming.
Mm-hmm.
And then they keep tying in like these doomsday presentations throughout the
Yes.
whole thing. And
Yeah.
so they do a good job of like making it seem like this is beyond just like the psychology of characters. Like there is a physical world that is coming to an end and that
Mm-hmm.
is being addressed. I think it's a really clever way to.
It is. Well, and I mean, I think folks who have maybe walked around a city, you see people who
Mhm.
are the callers on the corners of streets that are talking about the end of the world. And so, as a player, if you're just kind of thinking and you have no reason to not think more deeply about it, you're just like, yeah, I guess, this is just what you see in a city. And so I didn't even think twice when some of these references and some of these things were put up at the start. And then at the end of the game and even going back and replaying it, I'm just like, oh, everything is there for you at the beginning.
Mhm.
And there is one detail, but I'll save it for when we kind of go through chronologically because we didn't talk about one thing that you get in the prologue that's so important to the game. And that is this magic red book.
Yes. Oh yeah, the principal mechanic of the game. Yeah, please, Jenny, tell us about the red book.
So, um, at the very beginning of the game, Nirmala and Atma are working on a story, and Nirmala says that she's stuck. She's unable to continue, and she doesn't know where she wants it to go. And she says to Atma, "Hey, there's this magic red journal. If you go grab it, maybe we can." I think something along the lines of figure something out. And Atma grabs the journal, and basically it provides him the power to be able to space dive into someone's mind and see their innermost anxieties, fears, whatever is on their mind at the moment and causing them struggle, angst, or confusion.
Yeah, and I think the additional layer that we learned about is like an intentional representation when it's like a character NPC or PC, is having a hard time making a decision between two things.
Right. And what I love, oh my gosh, it's so good because every time you space dive, you encounter flowers and you encounter two colors. You encounter blue and you encounter yellow. And as we play the game, I noticed, and we'll dive into exactly what they mean.
Space dive.
We'll space dive into this. But there are certain points in time where the blue flowers bloom, and there's certain points in time where the yellow flowers bloom. Did you notice that?
You're totally right. I remember noticing that there was a difference. Sometimes it was blue, sometimes it was yellow.
Yeah.
I never made a connection that there was a reason for that.
Oh, there is such a reason, and it is so good. And you don't know really what's going on until about mid to late game. And I love that they have all of these pieces that, again, are happening and you just don't know exactly what. You're like Atma. You don't know what's going on, but you know something's happening. And so as you help Nirmala through, you dive into her mind, you help her work through her writer's block, through suggesting a possible ending for the story. And yes, I see.
I have a shocked look on my face because it's this idea that in the prologue, I didn't even remember that one of the first people you dive into, that you space dive into, is Nirmala. It really sets the tone for the mechanic to be used the rest of the game. Because of like what is actually happening. What's actually happening, like the meta narrative of this game. I had not made that connection until this exact moment. What incredible!
It's so good. It's so good. And so you leave, and then that's when you go to the docks and there's a raft and you're going to go. I think Nirmala's like, I built a rocket ship or something, and you have to go to Nirmala's house to pick up the magic wand because, and I'd love you to tell this because you reacted so viscerally to this portion of the prologue.
Oh God, yeah. Basically, when you go back to Nirmala's house and you kind of climb in through her upstairs window, very like 90s sitcom-esque, if you were like a Blossom person, perhaps, that you go in through the window, you're looking through her things, and you find the magic wand that you're looking for, and you hear this like bang, 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 and it's the dad, Nirmala's dad, banging on the door because he hears that someone is home and someone is in the room. And I think many of us, especially those of us that kind of grew up in like the 90s, 80s, like that time period, that was such a common parenting tactic. It's like it wasn't necessarily like a physical abuse, although we learned that was part of what was happening in Nirmala's house, but just the use of fear as a tool for control. And man, the second that happened, it was such a visceral scene. My stomach just clenched. I texted Jenny. I was like, this is we're getting very serious very quickly here.
Yes. Yeah, it was really interesting. And I appreciate the discussion that was had in the Discord because there was a lot of, this game takes place in the 90s. And so there is a different style of parenting even that is prevalent in that time. And there are also, I imagine, like cultural elements that we have to consider as well, just because like there's just is a different time, different place. And so it was really interesting to feel the universal feeling, I guess, of it brought me right back to being a kid. And actually, I wasn't allowed to shut my door when I was a kid. Like that was a big thing. My parents were just like, you don't shut your door for whatever reason. And I remember I did it once and it wasn't a knocking because I wasn't allowed to shut it. Why would they knock? And the way that my parent opened the door just so quickly, that for me, the knocking brought that moment back.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, yeah, just my gut just fell. My stomach just fell out of my feet, basically.
It felt like one of those moments. We don't know, obviously, like what writers are responsible for what parts of this game, but if I know that if I were looking to consult with like a therapist or something along those lines to say like, hey, we want to get across the point that like this is an abusive household and we want to send that message clearly, but we don't want to scare our gamers away in the first 5 minutes of the game. Like, how would you do that? It felt like such a real life way to immediately get that point across and make sure that your players have that emotional connection to it without it being I mean, it was still somewhat triggering. Like my stomach clenched, so like it was somewhat triggering, but it wasn't like a I don't know what the word, like maybe like gory. Like it
Yeah, it's
wasn't like
graphic.
graphic.
Yeah.
That's the word. Yeah, it wasn't like a graphic depiction of violence within the home. So it was just like it was not subtle, but it was an impactful way to tell that message without it being bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so we grab the magic wand, we're heading back, and a rainstorm begins. And this is not just any rainstorm. This is, and we were talking to Damas about this, and this is like monsoon season, right? So this is building up to be a pretty torrential downpour. Like, this is very significant. And we go back as Atma to the dock, and we go back to base camp, and we hear a cry for help. And it turns out that Nirmala was excited and was in the raft and was not waiting like we had asked her to, and was on the river and holding on for dear life at this point.
Yeah. And we go straight from that into kind of the first hero moment of the story, where Atma is going to try and reach out and help Nirmala, and then try and reach out and, fish back. Was it the book that was in the river?
Yeah, it was initially first with a magic wand, and then I think it breaks or falls or something, and then again with the book, Atma tries to reach out.
So we watch, like, we go into like a cutscene type moment where we watch Atma drown, essentially, or like what the participant playing the game would assume is, like, it seems like he's drowning here. Like, you go underwater, everything kind of shifts. You see him reaching out for Nirmala on the dock, this little girl on the dock. And we wake up. Or is there a moment before
There is a moment before that I wanted to highlight.
Please.
Because the first time I played the game, I saw this and I was like, I think this is going to be way more than I think it is. And that is, as Atma falls, you start to the screen starts to transform, and it almost becomes an Alice in Wonderland falling through the rabbit hole, because you see furniture, you see like items kind of floating upward, and it becomes this moment. And as soon as I saw that, I immediately thought of Alice in Wonderland. And folks who are familiar with Alice in Wonderland, one of the big things is wondering if Alice like dreamt it or not on the golden afternoon. Was it all just a dream in her nap, or did she actually go down the rabbit hole and find Wonderland? And so with that, I immediately thought, okay, so is this all a dream?
Yes.
Because that imagery was so strong for me, and that's when I started, my gears started turning.
So let's talk about this juxtaposition, because after this moment is when you wake up in class, right? It's the beginning of chapter 1. You wake up in class as though you've been sleeping. And so as the audience, as the player, you're thinking, okay, well, either the thing that we just played through was like a dream that he was having, or something deeper is happening in this reality that he's just woken up to, right?
Right.
And I think the reason that they want you to be suspicious is because you wake up with no memory in what seems to be the real world.
Right. It's weird, because the first thing when you wake up, you see someone in front of you, and it's Raya. And she asks and says, like, oh, do you not remember who I am? And, it's kind of one of those things as a joke you might say to a friend who's just woken up and is groggy. But there's an option for you to say no. And it's kind of unclear whether or not you want that to be a jokey no, or if legitimately Atma does not remember what is happening and who this person is in front of him. I was like, is this just a groggy teenager, or is there something more happening here?
That's so good. So here's like an insight to Joel's mind. One of my least favorite things in books, movies, comics, you name it, is when there is the central drama revolves around one character not sharing a piece of information that they have that the other person does not have. And so when I play games like this and you're given the choice, I am always brutally honest. Like, no, I don't remember you. Who is this person? What is this school? Who are these bullies? I was like, anytime I was given the dialogue option to be like, no, I don't know, I was like, yeah, I'm just going to tell him, because in my mind, like my thinking is, well, that's the most efficient way. That's the most efficient way to find out what's happening. Of course, in this game, it is not the most efficient way to find out what's happening. But yeah, I don't know if any of you have that same thing where it's just like, what points of drama like get become hangups for you.
Oh my
I have a
goodness.
lot of interesting thoughts about this loss of memory. I'm curious about anything that kind of stood out to you.
Not really. Again, I think at this point in the game, I was just kind of like, I don't know if this is just a derpy teenager or or what.
There was something that he said, which was like, it just seemed like there was a lot of interesting flirting going on. Like, you wake up in the classroom with no memory. One of the first things that you say to Raya is, "I can purr too if you want," and it's like the absolute riz of like saying this to a girl that you don't remember, that is staring you in the face and is telling you that she is your girlfriend. I was like,
I know.
Get it, Atma? Like, well done. I wouldn't be that smooth.
Again, I'm like, are you just a really confident teenager?
Yeah,
like,
yeah, exactly,
so good.
exactly.
But it is weird because you then, like, when you leave the classroom, you then bump into who we find out later is it Marin? Marin?
Yeah,
Marin.
right.
And I think, I can't remember if she doesn't quite remember you. No, she does remember you, but you don't remember her.
Right.
And so I thought that was odd because, again, it's like if you are a senior and you've ostensibly been here for a bit and you're not in a very, very big school, that's weird.
It's a small town, right? Like, you know everybody. You know the names of the people who work at the stores around town.
Exactly.
Right?
And that's what makes it more weird, because the more you walk around, there are a lot of people you know, and then just people who you'd think if you saw them every day going to school, you don't know. And so there's just this odd, again, there's like things that don't quite add up for some reason throughout this first part of the game.
Yes. What are some of the moments in that like opening first chapter that like really stood out to you?
The cats.
We haven't even talked about the cats. We haven't even
talked about the cats.
And it's why we are drinking out of these cat mugs today.
It's true. The first things you do are, the first side quest you do, really, besides leaving school, is once you're out, you are trying to feed a cat, which I think is absolutely incredible. There are cats all around the town. You can pet them, you can name them, and so they become part of the village sort of landscape and painting, where you're not only interacting with all of the people and getting to know them, but you have cats. You know, if you play like me, every time I passed a cat, even if I knew who it was, sometimes especially if I knew who it was, like, again, Wizard was maybe one of my favorite cats. I pet Wizard every single time I walk by them.
You must. You absolutely must. And we talked about this in the interview, but it was a really unfortunate moment for Joel when he got to the end of the game and thought he had pet every cat and had actively tried to pet every cat, only to find out that I had missed 2 cats. So brutal. I didn't get to pet the fluffiest animal in the world.
And it makes me so, and I'm excited to tell you about what happens when you do, because it's a really like very, very special moment.
Oh.
No, but I'm excited to share and tell you.
I'm excited to hear about it.
Yeah.
So you get to this. It's a great mechanic. We talked with Damas about this. Like, it was something that they intentionally pulled in, thinking about their experiences working in the office, and they have cats kind of all around. They have something they refer to as their boss. So it was a really cool moment. But I think it was one of those grounding mechanics of the game that like really made it feel fun.
Yeah, and another thing that struck me about the first chapter was also the bucket list that was made by our 2 protagonists, because it was so adorable.
I think you asked about this, right? And maybe one of the first supplementary pieces. So what are some of the things, Jenny? Like, if you were like high school Jenny, what would have been on her bucket list in those days?
Oh my gosh, it would have absolutely. Okay, so this was back in the day when the mall was like a cool place to hang out. You would go to Limited 2 was the height of fashion for preteens.
Naturally.
And so it would have included things like going to the mall with a friend, going to a movie theater, going to a dance, like random little activities. And I think that's what I appreciated when I was looking at the bucket list that these 2 made, is it wasn't like travel the world, discover the cure for cancer. It wasn't these unobtainable things. Their bucket list for senior year was really realistic, which I appreciated. And it actually got me thinking about just the way I set even my own goals in my personal life, and how a lot of times I personally think about the big goals. I think about like, what am I going to get done so that my career like I'm going great in career places. I'm going to do this in 5 years, my 10-year plan. And I'm like, how can I redefine success and my personal feelings of achievement to be maybe something like, hey, let me just collect 20 bottle caps and just enjoy this like satisfaction of collecting 20 unique things together. So yeah, it really got me thinking, which was awesome. What about you?
That. I had a lot of tactile hobbies when I was in high school.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had like a really like robust CD collection. I loved going to the used CD store and getting used CDs and like taking out the CD jacket and like putting that jacket in the wallet and protecting the CD itself.
Yeah.
It was like a whole thing. But there was one thing that I distinctly remember always wanting when I was in high school. Spoiler alert, it did not happen in high school. But I remember going through the mall and seeing couples where like their hands were in each other's back pockets.
Oh my gosh.
Am I okay? I might
tell me more.
This might be like one of those things where it's like we think like, young public displays of affection are like silly or lame or whatever. But I remember in high school being like, that is what I want so badly. Is like that walking through the mall and like someone that like there's the fast burning high school romance. We have our hands in each other's back pockets. We're going to, I don't know, Aeropostale or whatever. And like that to me was like high school bucket list for sure.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that so much. Oh my gosh, high school Joel. I wish I could have known him.
Was chapter 1 the movie date?
It was the movie date.
We must talk about the movie date.
Well, and it happens pretty quick. We feed the cat. And I think pretty much after we feed the cat, we go on the date. And that brought back so many good memories. Like, oh my goodness. After you have to pick which movie you're going to go see. And none of them have cats, which is disappointing. But you strangely also, after spending money on the cat food, Atma's like, I don't have enough money for the tickets anyway. But there's a little flash of blue, and Raya has Atma saying, wait, or no, not Atma, the concession person saying, wait, there's actually a special deal today, and it's a 2-for-1, and you can go see a movie because you can buy a ticket and get one free.
Yep.
That's
what a coincidence. The world was not normal. Things are weird.
Yes.
So we go into the movies.
Yes.
And I actually just found I recorded this moment when I was playing through it, and I sent it to Jenny right before. You sit down next to Raya as Atma, and you have your big bucket of popcorn between the two of you. And it was like the most wholesome thing where it's like one person goes to put their hand in the popcorn. And then you get to choose like when to press like X or whatever to like put your hand in. And if you go at the same time, both of your eyes like get really big. Like, oh my gosh, I accidentally touched the hand of this person I'm on a date with that is apparently my girlfriend, though I don't remember her. But it was so...
And you both like retract your hands super fast.
Oh, yes. And then for me, it was like, yes, this is what I wanted in high school. I'm going to relive it now.
It's true. Oh my gosh, because like I didn't really date in high school. I had like a couple of random blind dates that were so awkward because they were friends who had set me up with like someone they knew from their youth group, and I didn't even go to youth group, so it was just also very weird. It was very weird. And I remember being in a movie theater, sitting next to this guy who I had never seen before, and I knew he was doing the thing where he put his arm on the handrest to try and, indicate like, oh, hey, if you put your arm here, like maybe we could hold hands. But I was just like perfect posture, straight backed, like hands tucked in. I was like, I don't know what to do right now. It was so awkward.
That teenage feeling, that uncertainty where the stakes could not be higher.
Yeah, and it's like the movie's playing, but I'm not thinking, like the movie is not going through my head at all. I am entirely aware of like every arm hair that could potentially be touching his arm. It's just the hyper awareness that I had of that moment. It's still with me, and this scene brought me back to that point.
We were talking about this. If you're not in the Discord, you should check it out. It's a fun time. We were talking about various movie date experiences. And I remember I I only remember having one movie theater date. Maybe there were more. But I only remember
Mm-hmm.
one. And I remember sitting down next to the girl that I was with and putting my arm over her shoulder because that's what I remember seeing in TV and movies.
Yeah.
And like we were in high backed chairs.
Oh, no.
So it was like within like a minute, like she's
Mm-hmm.
sitting forward with her head at an awkward angle because my arm is like on her shoulder so she can't lean back against the chair. She's like, I'm really uncomfortable.
Oh,
Can
no.
we just like hold hands or something? It's like, yes, yes. Now let us enjoy The Punisher together.
Oh my
Oh
gosh, that's
no.
so amazing.
Hey, get in the comments. Tell us about your awkward movie
Oh
date moments.
man,
I'm
yeah.
eager to
I
feel
would
better about
love
myself.
I would love to hear that because I had no savvy when I was a kid.
Okay, one of the other things that I think we must talk about
Mm-hmm.
is this idea of planning for the future.
Yeah.
Because this
Yeah.
begins in chapter 1.
Yep.
This idea that like you have this project, I guess, for school.
Yeah, it's like the future planning sheet.
The future planning sheet.
Yeah.
For those of you who maybe are not familiar with this or haven't played the game, like
Mm-hmm.
especially in U.S. schools, we still do this where we do like
Mm-hmm.
you fill out a survey to talk about what you're interested in. You get back a little thing. And it's like, here's what we think a job you should pursue. And we got to see that kind of play out, or like they wanted that to play out, but
Right.
you never do. You never fill out this sheet.
No. And it's interesting. Well, and the game kicks off with Raya saying like I could fill out the sheet and she is portrayed, especially at the beginning of the game, as the perfect like model student. The
Mhm.
teacher is like, Raya, you're perfect. Like
Oh, that's
you're the
right.
student. Like I know that you would never forget this. Like you should make sure to get the appointment in. And then he turns to Atma and he's like, and you, yeah, just like get this done. You know, like you can tell there's like a good student, bad student dynamic
Yes.
for sure.
Absolutely.
And it's like anyone who's been in school, like a public school or any school, probably has seen that happen in real time. But yeah, even like they both don't fill it out. Instead, they make the bucket list.
I was going back through my screenshots
Mm-hmm.
and I saw there's a flash. You get kind of a flashback where Atma gets a memory,
Yeah.
and it's him talking to Nirmala.
Yes.
And it's not the beginning of the game.
Yep.
It is something that happens chronologically before the beginning of the game. And he says, and I wrote this down, you shouldn't miss this kind of opportunity to plan your future. This is Atma talking to little Nirmala. And I think as you play through this game, I want us to come back to this conversation around like planning for the future, because to me, I think this is one of those subtle themes that gets peppered in. And one of my hypotheses that I'd like for us to talk about when we get to like the end and the big reveals and everything is, was this one of the triggering events that set kind of the whole story in motion? This being asked to plan your future, because it keeps coming up. It comes up in almost every chapter that either it's like in the background you find that piece of paper and it's like a clue, or you're talking to a teacher and they're remembering that like, oh yeah, I signed that piece of paper about planning for your future. One of my hypotheses is that is one of the triggering events for the whole story.
I had not thought about it, but I really like that hypothesis. Yeah, that's good stuff. So we're in chapter 1. Pretty much, I would say that is most of what chapter 1 entails. I would say one thing I wanted to point out, Kittercat mentioned it in the Discord. Chapter 1 really establishes the fact that as a game, just looking at the mechanics of the game. Kittercat said, I also noticed this is a game that really benefits from you interacting with everyone and everything. And I think that's super important for anyone who's playing this game. And I think it could either be really annoying to some people or it could be really sort of exciting for people who really love that kind of methodical looking through everything. But I also think just as we play the game, that became more and more apparent. And while there are some parts that I think they maybe overstayed a little bit their welcome for me personally, overall, I loved that the game wanted you to like basically touch everything.
Yeah, and you get to explore the city, or like the first chunk of it in
Mm-hmm.
chapter 1, and like various paths are blocked, they get
Yeah.
unblocked as you play through, but they really kind of force you to establish yourself as a part of the community. And yeah, I think this is actually a critical theme running kind of throughout. I
Mm-hmm.
actually wrote this down as like a thematic recurrence, which is um, this idea that community plays an active role in your personal identity and the way you
Mm-hmm.
talk about who you are.
Yep.
Dimas, when we were interviewing him, talked about how it was really important to them that everyone living in the town had a complex and nuanced backstory.
Right.
And man, chapter 1 really sets it up. You meet
Mm-hmm.
like the man who owns the like corner store. He ends up being directly connected to some of the other characters that we meet in like chapter 2 with Erik,
Right.
etc. So yeah, I think like this is another really key element that you don't see in a lot of games, is
Mm-hmm.
the community of like NPCs are not there just to be like help you, finish your quests or your tasks
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. If you're going to fully understand the characters, like the main characters of the story, you will be missing out on huge chunks of that story if you don't
Yes.
interact with these characters.
Yeah. Which is how life actually works.
Yeah.
Nobody is an island, as much as maybe some people wish they were.
Yeah.
We are who we are based on who we interact with, who raised us, who didn't raise us. It's like we are so much more than ourselves. We are built because of the people who surround us. And so I think that's something this game gets across really, really wonderfully.
Yes, totally. Shall we
So,
jump into chapter 2?
yeah, chapter 2. So I think chapter 2 and 3 are both really similar structurally. I
Yeah.
think we have some really major things that we learn, but both of them involve a lot of running around and gathering items and taking them to people. And I'm curious how you felt about that.
I spoiler alert for Joel's life. I don't love games where you're just running around and like fulfilling tasks for other people.
Yeah.
I refer to them as chore simulators. Jenny has informed me that there's actually a name for like point and click adventures. Like this
Yes,
is
like-
the way these games work.
Like fetch quests.
Fetch
Yeah.
quests. Yeah, fetch quests. That was a new term to me. I had never
Yeah.
heard before. And I think when we first started,
Mhm.
I was very hesitant and had my guard up for the game because it was clear that like fetch quests would be a part of it.
Right.
And it's so rare that those are done well in my experience. I think about like
Mhm.
Link's Awakening being like a fantastic
Right.
way that works. But what got me into it was it became clear pretty quickly that you're not just running from person to person
Mhm.
to like, I need 17 cuckoo birds and you need to go find me those 17 birds. Anytime you are asked to be part of a fetch between two people,
Right.
there was a story for how those people were connected.
Mhm.
And it made it such a way more rich experience for me than when it's like, no, you're just going to find the 17 birds and
Right.
deliver them.
Right. Yeah, I think I personally really enjoy those kind of quests. I love being able to check off a box that I did things. Productivity complex, I don't know. But I really loved it, and I loved it. It provided this opportunity for us not only to get to know the people because we're helping them out, but we got more just embedded into the world. And I felt like by the time these chapters were done, I had been running through the village. It felt like home to me in a lot of ways. I knew, and I think you mentioned this as well when we talked to Dimas, where it's like I knew where the corner store was, I knew where the net cafe was, I knew where the school was, I know where the back alley is, where kids like to give each other pop quizzes for some reason.
That's my kind of gang.
Yeah, I know, right? So I think what was really nice is that even though at times it felt a little slow, it also felt intentional in the sense of it forced you to, if you're walking along the same roads multiple times, you at some point you do notice the details, and at some point you do like absorb what this place is about. And I think that was really cool, even though again occasionally slow, but I think it ultimately left me feeling much more connected to the world.
Can I add, this might be just because I haven't played a lot of like 2D side scrolling games in a really long time. but there was like a three-dimensionality to this 2D map that I couldn't think of other games that I had played that were similar. So everything is left to right side scroller as you're
Right.
playing through the game. But if you turn left, like imagine a square, it's kind of like you're turning left to go like around the corner, and then you're turning left to go around the corner again.
Yeah.
And so it even though it was a 2D side scrolling experience, you were very much interacting in a three-dimensional space.
Yes.
And that felt like really fresh to me. And maybe other games do this and I just haven't experienced them, but it felt really good.
Yeah, it did feel really good. And I think other games attempt this, and I know other games have this, but I think something about this felt very intuitive, and somehow it felt just more, I don't know, it was just immersive for some reason. Like I felt like I knew this village, which doesn't often happen for me. Very often I am a map checker. I will have a mini map up, or I will constantly be bringing up a map. And that was there was a map in the journal. I think I saw it because you have the tutorial that shows you, and I don't think I looked at it once because I felt so familiar with the place.
That's so good. Do you know when I looked at it?
Yeah.
When you are at the school, and it's like chapter 2 or 3, and the courtyard opens up for the first time. So if you can imagine like a capital letter A, but with a flat top instead of a pointy top, like an alarm clock A, if you will. In chapters 2 or 3, the middle line that goes through the A opens up, if that's like the shape of the school grounds, and you can cut through the courtyard. And you could cut off part of the map to like make your way through. And when that opened up, and I walked, and you're in the middle of the courtyard, in the middle of that like line, in the middle of the letter A, if you will, I immediately understood where I was. I was like, oh, this 2D experience is like this capital letter A from an alarm clock, and I am in the middle of the line that's connecting it. And it was such a like, whoa, I didn't realize that's the kind of game I was playing, that I opened the map and I saw, sure enough, that's exactly what's happening. And I was like, wow, like they have communicated this so beautifully with this one subtle experience in the schoolyard.
It's so good. Yeah, I just can't speak highly enough about I love that we talk about the place a lot because, again, Dimas mentioned that this game was meant specifically to be a time capsule. This is meant to capture a moment in time for this culture, for this region, and for these people. And so I think the fact that the setting itself is its own character, I think of the game like Yakuza is another example of a game where time and place is almost, if not sometimes, more important than the characters themselves. And I think this game really captures that spirit. And again, Dimas mentioned really having that be a strong intention for the game.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I think the thing that we start seeing when we get into chapter 2 is that the lives of these like NPCs get more and more complex.
Right.
And the histories that they carry and their relationships with each other gets more and more detailed. How did you feel about like the overall mystery of the game as you got through chapters 2 and 3? Like so chapters 2 and 3, like just mechanically, you're dealing more with the school bullies, like Erik, the school bully. And I think Lulu is chapter 3.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're getting to know other characters a bit more. They are starting to realize something is going on. What clues were you picking up, and like, how did you feel about like the overarching, like what is actually going on here?
Well, what's interesting is so at the end of chapter 1, Raya collapses because of using her powers. And so we have this huge problem that we're confronted with is Raya. We didn't even talk about Cat Wonderland, by the way. Oh my gosh. Okay. Oh my goodness. There's so much to this game. Raya uses her powers to take us to Cat Wonderland, which is this fantastical world that she created with her mind with cats that you can pet and enjoy forever. Something goes horribly wrong. We think maybe it's because Atma space dives, but we're not entirely sure within Cat Wonderland. And so at the end of chapter 1, Raya collapses. Chapter 2 begins with us trying to figure out a way to sort of help her, make her feel better. And so we're gathering ingredients for a cake. And that's when we have the run-in with Erik and the bullies. We don't know what Erik's beef is with us, but Erik does not like us. And because he doesn't like us, his little gang of cronies also doesn't like us. What was really interesting to me is, again, I was confused as to narratively, I'm like, what is happening? Why is this guy so mad at us? Why is he so possessive of Raya when we're dating? Like, what is
I
this?
was told when I woke up that I'm her boyfriend.
I thought she said we were dating, so I don't know why you're getting your panties in a twist right now, because this is not like, are you just that jealous?
Mm-hmm.
And what was really interesting as well is they introduce a new mechanic where you start to learn how to fight. And actually, I love that in this chapter 2, when you're learning how to sort of protect yourself and to protect Raya against the bullies, they have this sort of Street Fighter inspired arcade situation, which is great. But it also felt very uncharacteristic of Atma. Like, Atma does not seem like a fighter, and so in playing this, I'm like, this is kind of weird because Atma's learning how to punch things, and he initially just wants to defend. And so that also felt interesting from a character's perspective, that he's been put in this position.
And put is the right word, right? Like, as a hero, this is not like a, not even necessarily a reluctant hero story. It is a person that has like kind of been explicitly called in to be the hero.
Right.
That is the function, and that is like your function as the player. Until you get to the end of the game and everything kind of changes on you.
But I guess to fast forward it a little bit, because we do all of these things, we collect all of these ingredients for a cake, because one of the bucket list items is a Black Forest gâteau. And we dive into a chef who is grappling because we can't bake the cake because the chef isn't available, but the chef is going through their own conundrum. They don't want to bake things anymore. They're really good at baking. It's not a lack of skill, but they're feeling called towards a different type of cuisine. But we space dive into their minds, and as we push them towards baking, because we need them to bake, we find that in the space dive, the blue flowers are the ones that bloom. And I don't know if you noticed that.
Okay, I can't wait anymore. You've got to tell me the difference between the yellow and the blue.
So what's happening, again, at this point, I was hypothesizing, but I noticed that in this space dives, we are helping someone and they're coming to their own conclusions, and they are finding peace with their responses because we have enabled them to, again, just get there on their own. The yellow flower is the one that blossoms. When they're able to basically self-actualize and go towards their passions and feel really good about their choices. Whenever a blue flower in a space dive blooms, it is because we have pushed them intentionally towards something maybe they did not want, or they did not come to that conclusion themselves. And if you think about the colors, and we'll get into sort of more of this reveal, but the colors that surround Raya, which is blue. We always see Raya with the blue. We always see Nirmala with the yellow. We have that juxtaposition there.
You get the cats that are all like they're cats that represent this, like the yellow, like the dark color versus the orangish color.
And so when we're looking at motifs, the color of the flower is a really big, important motif that we see throughout the entire game.
Okay, so this was a question that we posed on the Discord, was as you start playing and get into the space dive mechanic, I was just kind of curious like how people felt about it. And we had a really interesting conversation online talking through this. I initially felt like kind of uncomfortable with the space dive mechanic because it was like, well, I'm entering into these people's minds without their consent, identifying some of their deepest fears, anxieties, decision points, and then I am what the word that came to my mind was, it felt like I was manipulating them. Like I am trying to get something out of this exchange that serves my needs in this moment. And so it's so interesting because I did not at all make this connection between the blue and the yellow flower, that at times you, I guess now that I think about it, you were more an active participant in their healing and helping them self-actualize versus pushing them towards a specific decision. So the chef who's trying to decide, I guess one would be like, do I want to make Chinese cuisine or do I want to continue making sweet baked goods, which Joel would love.
I know.
I'm a cookie fiend, for those of you who don't know. As this character is working through their question, what is my future? What is this future thing? And rather than us helping them self-actualize in this moment, we have pushed them and manipulated them.
Yeah.
And now that you're saying this, it all makes sense how it's later in the game. All these people that you engaged with,
right,
you see again, and they are not in a good place.
No, yeah. In later parts of the game, everything's broken, and we see the sort of twisted version of everybody that we have space dived into.
Oh,
yeah,
space divin,
space dove,
space doved.
Space jam. I don't know.
Space jam. I think another like important theme in like the chapter 2-3 area is that continued discussion around abuse, and in this case, even physical abuse. You start seeing the Erik's experiences with the shop owner who. All signs point to was physically abusive with him. I want to say in maybe chapter 3 he actually hits Lulu. Does that sound familiar?
I think it does.
I had a screenshot and I was trying to remember, and I think that might have been what happened there. And it was like one of those moments where they did. It was almost, in my mind, it was like a subtle nudge from the writers again to say like, don't forget, like there's some deep-seated like traumatic things that are going on here. And as we learn more about Erik and kind of him being the bully or aggressive, I think we're supposed to have a moment of empathy to say like, oh, like he's this way because of this other thing. And that was one of the important themes that came through, which is like hurt people.
Right. I mean, generational trauma.
Yeah.
There's a whole genre of movies now basically based on addressing that and kind of grappling with that. And I think Lulu does mention, even, she calls the shopkeeper. She's like, Uncle, you stop beating him. Like maybe just talking to him would help. And I think, again, it goes back to this idea of, I much more remember like in the 80s and 90s, like spanking your kids and being a bit more physical with them was considered more of a norm than now. And so thinking about that and how that was also a bit more normalized, obviously beating is a different, totally different thing, but it kind of brought me back to that. And what's interesting is with Erik's space dive, we see Erik not simply as Erik in there. We see two versions of Erik. We see the child Erik, who's literally trapped in a cage and unable to get out because he says, like, he won't let me out, talking about himself. And the other version of Erik we see in the space dive is like a werewolf, basically.
Yes. And I think, like, let's talk about this for a bit, because I think this is a really critical theme. And again, I got to imagine it's because they have this, like, psychologist on staff. But, like, an idea that when you are hurt as a child, the only way that you can resolve some of that is to do the work, quote, with that inner child. And so I think this is one of the first big clues, in my opinion, as to what's really going on, is that space dive with Erik, where you see him and him dealing with his inner child. There was an interesting quote that I think came out of this. So as you are playing through this game, you kind of re-encounter Erik throughout, and then again at the end. And one of the things that Erik says, and I want to be very clear, I am extremely anti-bully, and I had a very hard time. I do not forgive Erik. I am not okay with him. But he says this line, and it kind of got to me. He said, I'm the one you have more in common with than you might dare to believe. He's talking to Raya at this moment. And one of the things that I was wondering about is when you don't have an opportunity to like heal that inner child and do that inner work,
right,
you can either project it or you can internalize it. And I think what we see with Erik is like very much I have externalized, and I am making this hurt that I have everyone else's problem. And what we learn about Raya's move forward is she is very, very much internalized a lot of that pain.
Yeah. And the more we learn about them, they are almost mirror images of one another in terms of how they've reacted to the a very similar type of trauma in the home. So I think Erik's a fascinating character to me. I mentioned this in the Discord, but I had, both of us were teachers, and I know Erik. I have a student who is Erik, and I think about him regularly and wonder what happened. I hope he's okay. I hope he was able to move past it. And so seeing Erik really brought me back to that student in particular because, this game draws from very real scenarios, and I've seen this student.
Yeah, I don't know that I can talk about this without bursting into tears.
Yeah,
but I will just say, yes, I think, again, it didn't feel like they had cheapened at all the experience of household harm and abuse and what that is like. Mm-hmm. I think this is just one of those moments where they were able to say hey, don't forget this very serious thing happened at the very beginning of the game. Right. You're going to keep seeing little flashes of this. We don't want you to forget because it's going to be really important.
Exactly. And so we go through Erik's mind. We try, we release young Erik. We try to grapple with, I think they call it Vile Were-Dog is the boss battle. That's right. We try to reason, we try to fight, and we think maybe we have gotten through. Mm-hmm. But then something very odd happens.
This totally caught me by surprise.
My jaw dropped because we see first Nirmala show up into Erik's space dive, and at this point, Nirmala has been a dream. Yep. We don't think Nirmala is maybe real, or maybe Nirmala is a past memory. We're not sure. Mm-hmm. But Nirmala shows up in a space dive, and that's weird. And Nirmala also brings this giant gargoyle cat named Bosk. Yeah.
So cool.
Boss. As we learned from Damas. And not only does Bosk flap his wings, basically, his gargoyle wings, and whisk Atma away and out of the space dive forcibly, but we are back in the world and we see Erik, and Erik begins to transform into his Vile Were-Dog version in what we presume is real life.
Yep.
So things are going just off the walls at this point.
Yep.
We don't know what's real and what's not.
And then we flash and we wake up again.
One other thing happens.
Oh, wait, what else happens?
And this brought chills to my soul because Raya shows up and first uses her power to turn Erik back. And then when Erik, sobbing, is trying to apologize, because we realize also the conflict between Raya and Erik is the fact that he had hit her cat with his scooter, his motorcycle. Mm-hmm. He's sobbing, trying to apologize and essentially ask for forgiveness for what has happened. And Raya just tells him to shut it and wipes him from existence.
Yes.
And I'm getting chills thinking about it because she does that and then turns and picks up the cake and just starts to eat it as if nothing else has happened. As if Atma had just brought her the cake. And she collapses, and that's when everything kind of fades to black. It's a chilling scene.
It is. It is. This person that's just kind of wiped from existence, and you're like, oh, so she's got power. Something is going on here.
Yeah. Well, and for me, one of the themes that I really started to pick up at this point is this nature of forgiveness in the wake of wrongs being done to you. Mm-hmm. Because Erik had been grappling, and we don't know what his situation is with his dad, but we know that Raya and Erik have had something happen, and he's having a hard time forgiving himself. Raya clearly is also have a hard time forgiving him because she wipes him. And we're going to see this idea of what happens when you're not willing to forgive and let go versus when you are willing to let go and forgive. Mm-hmm. And that's something we start seeing come up more and more as we play.
Yeah, because the next chapter is Lulu.
Oh, yeah.
And that is all about this, it's kind of like the other end of Mean Girls in a way. That's kind of how I felt about that chapter.
It absolutely is. Yeah. Oh, would you like to dive into Lulu's chapter?
So you wake up again, right? In the class?
In the same
classroom. And things are just, slightly askew. It's a little bit different from the last time. Mm-hmm. You run into Lulu pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And you start realizing that Lulu, just like we as the players are thinking, something weird is going on here. Lulu is also hey, something weird is going on here. Mm-hmm. And the first task, I believe, is just to escape the school.
Yes, well, because everyone's running around and they're like, the festival. Mm-hmm. You got to prepare for the festival. And it honestly brought me back to, there's this in Final Fantasy VIII, there's a portion of the game where the headmaster goes missing from the garden. This is a very specific moment of a very specific game. But if anyone's played Final Fantasy VIII and remembers that moment and everyone's running around kind of like, what do? We got to do this thing. We got to find this thing. It very much feels like that. There's this sort of underlying chaos and tension. And we think maybe it's because of the festival, but also as players, and even Lulu and Atma, they know there's something more here because people are repeating phrases over and over again.
Yes.
Like they're glitching out.
Yes.
We're seeing the glitch on the few characters. It's just things are going askew.
And you're trying to find Raya from the beginning, right? And like it's like, well, she's clearly not on school grounds. We've got to go find her, so we have to leave the school to do so. And you encounter one of the, I guess, teachers, administrators, kind of like maybe a counselor. Hard to understand like what his actual job was, but he has taken on this entire like militaristic persona.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, this is clearly a teacher. We know that he's the one who was asking us about our future plans in the previous chapter. And now he has this complete like identity change.
Right.
And you space dive in and you go through and realize, okay, like he fully believes that he is this like military person, does not believe he works in a school at all. And I'm going to like just kind of bypass that for a moment to talk about the way they tell that is through Lulu.
Yeah, which I think is Lulu is fascinating. And honestly, I think visually one of my favorite space dives.
100%.
Because when you space dive, you're going through all of this, and I think you're space diving into Lulu to also determine, what this guy's identity and prove it in this sort of Ace Attorney fashion, which is also a great reference.
Great reference.
You have this really almost regal sort of the pillars, this Grecian sort of courthouse that you're going into with a gaggle of geese as your audience, and Lulu is sitting on a throne with two like geese angels.
The geese guardians.
The geese guardians at her side, and it's just so striking and beautiful and again, weird. Everything is just like, what is happening here?
And you see Lulu sitting on top of like this kind of throne, right?
Yeah.
She is there to pronounce judgment.
Yes.
And my first question was like, wait, is she actually space diving with me? Why is she inside this like teacher dude's head? What, like, it felt like it broke the rules for me in that moment. I think now I understand what was going on. But at the moment I was like, why are we seeing her in judgment of this teacher / military guy in his head? Yeah. What is going on here?
Well, wait, were we space diving in her head or his head at this point? Because I remember we also brought other community members. Did we just space dive into there? I guess we did. Yeah, you're right.
I'm not positive, but I feel like that might have. I just remember it striking me as odd that they were both inside, whether it was her mind or his mind. Either way, you're in one person's head, but there's now two people there.
Right.
And I thought that was just like a really strange thing in the moment. And your whole job is like, go collect evidence around the school that shows that this guy who we know is a teacher from the last chapter is in fact a teacher or is in fact a school employee. And so you go and you do that and you bring it forward. I'm going to tell you, I totally messed this up. I did not understand that how to play this part of the game at first. But I think what they are setting up in my mind, looking back on it, is they are showing that Lulu is a judgmental person.
Yes.
And I think they're setting up this kind of Mean Girls, I'll say trope, although I know it's a reality, but like this Mean Girls scenario where it's like Lulu does not have a good relationship with Raya, which is not immediately evident. But you find out the longer you play into this chapter into the game that like, oh, actually like these two have a lot of like, well, I'll use the word drama loosely. There's drama between them.
Yeah, there's definitely like, it's that sort of passive aggressive, like exactly sort of, it is the Mean Girls Queen Bee dynamic that especially, Raya is a very good student, presumably maybe one of the top in the class. Lulu is as well, but Lulu has the popularity factor and the relationship with people that allows her that edge to be considered quote unquote the best or better. And you see that each person we go to in this sort of court system, as we're interviewing them, we learn that Raya has been tasked with organizing this festival and has not been doing so great with it. And now Lulu is like, well, when I did the festival, it was perfect. And so now am I going to have to come in and clean up your mess? And so there is this tension between the two of them. And they, again, later on, they're a bit more explicit with it. But at first, it's very much that passive-aggressive teenage way of talking.
Absolutely. And we, again, like in that first space dive, they start bringing back some of those central kind of abusive themes. The school teacher, as you're getting into his memory, you see him confronting his father.
Yes.
His father, who has these expectations that he'll do something with his life that like means something. That something seems to be he wants him to work within the military, which we learn is actually like what his brother chose to do. The teacher's brother chose to do that. And so we come back to this question around like, what is your future? What's an acceptable future? What's an acceptable future to this father figure in your life? And how much influence and sway that can have over your decision making and your self-worth and your self-identity.
Yeah. And again, it's like when you do these space dives, you see that represented physically between the intertwining of the gold branch and the blue branch. And I think what's really interesting, and I mentioned earlier, there's this cultural component, and I'm not entirely sure, but when, as a player who, you know, has Korean family and that sense of expectation and like filial sort of piety and filial obligation, I guess, which is maybe a negative sounding term, but there's a sense of you're not doing things for yourself. You do things for your family as well. And I think anyone, you know, most people can probably relate to that to some extent, regardless from where you're from. But I know, especially like growing up, I for a long time was like, I have to go into like a medical field. I have to do something that will help make it worth, you know, all of the choices that my mom made to like come here. I got to make it worth it for her because she came here and she's sacrificing a lot so that I can do really well. And I think we see a lot of that in these, like you said, what is expected of you? What is the thing that society wants you to do? Your family wants you to do? What is the quote unquote best path for you, regardless of whether or not you want to take it and if it's the best for you.
Boy, howdy. It gets real. Is that one of those moments? Do you get yellow flowers from this?
Oh my gosh, I don't remember. I would have to go back and see.
Because it's kind of like a golden. So I don't know if I'm confused. If I'm conflating like kind of the golden Grecian pillars with the golden flowers or not. If anyone has replying that place, put in the comments. Was that a golden flower moment? Because you're helping him remember who he actually is there.
Yes.
So I wonder. I'm curious. Let us know in the comments. I'm curious. We get another interesting element. So like a lot of this chapter is trying to find Raya, trying to figure out what's going on with this festival.
Yes.
Do we eavesdrop on the dinner conversation in this one, or is that the next chapter? That's the next chapter.
That's the next chapter.
Okay, what you do get in this chapter is the fireworks storyline. This was one of my favorite elements of the entire game.
I loved this, but this also had the puzzle that I had to look. I think you were talking about it in Discord with some folks. This had the puzzle that the one puzzle that stumped me, and I ended up looking it up because I could not figure out what was going on.
Dear reader, Joel grew up with game guides and angelfire.com for walkthroughs. And so when Joel gets onto a puzzle he does not understand, he gives it about 2 or 3 tries and then he immediately looks it up.
Man, I'm so stubborn. I will just like, I will put a game down and come back to it just to try not to, because I love the feeling of figuring it out myself to a point where I'm probably too obstinate for my own good.
So, I mean, actually, like we talked about this with To the Moon when I got stuck on the plant puzzle and I was on like, I think I had tried like 170 times in total before I finally figured out what was going wrong with that puzzle. And like, that's what happens when Joel doesn't look something up. And so Joel looks things up. I don't know why I'm talking in the third person so much. I look things up is what I do. But so you're trying to find a person who has connections to fireworks to help with the festival. You find a woman, and I think, is she wearing a hijab at this point? I think they're indicating that she's perhaps Muslim in the...
I think so. She's definitely got something tied around her head.
There's some indication that she has
Yeah.
like a religious component, which
Right.
matters here in a moment.
Yeah.
I'll explain why. But in her memory, she's like, I am the flame bringer. She has like
Yeah.
adopted this like almost arsonist persona.
Yes.
And you have to talk to the community to
Mhm.
learn about her.
Yes.
This is where it like first clicked with me that like the community truly matters. These fetch quests
Yeah.
truly matter. You talk to members of like what seems to be like a book club kind
Mhm.
of scenario to learn about her. You learn about the plants that she loves. You learn about a guy that like stole her trophy a long time ago. It turns out that guy is the Doomsday singer on the side of the street.
Yeah.
Like, it was like one of those moments like, oh, this is like a really rich town with
Mhm.
interconnected storylines. And you do the same thing that we do with a teacher, right? We
Right.
go in, we space dive, you see Lulu as the judge, and you have this woman who's trying to convince the judge, like, I am an arsonist, I am the flame bringer. She says what I thought was the funniest and best line perhaps ever, when you're asking her, like, I think someone says like something about like, what about you and your God? And she says, my God? He will burn with everything else. And I was like, that's the most badass line.
I know.
Wow.
So good.
I'm going to take that and use it as like a D&D. Like, I'm going to use that somewhere for sure. So what a cool line. But it was like, that was the moment for me that added a lot of depth to the like fetch quests and the conversations.
I love that. Yeah. I really love what you had mentioned not a long time ago, earlier in this podcast, where the NPCs do not fit the definition of NPC in the traditional sense. And I really like that because I think a lot of the time about when I'm driving in a car, it's very easy to see all the other cars as just boxes of things moving around me. And I like to think about who are the people in the cars next to me and what are their days like. It's just a fun game I play with myself, in the car when I'm driving on the highway and things like that. But it's a mentality I think is really significant, especially in this time when it's very easy to just look past people. It's very easy to not see people and to not see them as human. And this game really forces you to take a look at everyone in the village and not treat them as NPCs or inhuman or just accessories to the plot. They are the story. They are the story.
Yeah. You've just reminded me, for those of you, we live in like the Portlandish area, and there is a road near one of our old dance studios that when you're driving under a bridge, someone has graffitied the words on this bridge, "You are the traffic." And every time I drive under that bridge, it's like such a powerful reframing of my own experience. It's like when I complain, oh, traffic is so bad, or I can't believe about these drivers. I am that.
Yeah.
That is me. I am the traffic. I am the obnoxious driver to someone. It's like one of those moments where it's like you can't like stop seeing yourself as the main character,
Yeah. And I think it's very powerful to think of yourself as the main character, to romanticize your life in that way. But I almost wonder if in some ways we've gone too far in that direction and we've lost sight of what it means to maybe be a part of someone else's story or to share your story with other people.
Oh, boy. Okay, we're having a lot of fun here. So what else happens in this chapter with Lulu?
I think just to keep us moving along, I think we go through these quests and we then basically turn to Lulu and Space Dive Lulu. And we ultimately see Lulu transform the same way Erik does into just this ginormous black goose.
Yep.
Which is pretty incredible. I think it's stunning. Just looks beautiful. But again, we're seeing this corrupted version of Lulu in this space dive.
I took a screenshot of Lulu as the bird at the end.
Yeah.
And she says this line I thought was really interesting. She's talking about Raya at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously these two have beef. We've talked through it. They got bad blood. It's very like Katy Perry, Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
And she says, talking about Raya, weaves stories from the lives of people around her. She doesn't shove them down their throats. Mm-hmm. And I thought this was probably the most poignant first clue about what's actually happening within the actual like meta narrative of this game.
Right.
So Lulu, bad blood, mean girl Lulu, we start realizing like this is a critical part of like this high schooler Raya and what is maybe, I won't say causing, but what is informing kind of the story around us as we're moving forward.
Right. And again, we're looking at this and we're starting, at least at this point, because I knew this I knew Raya is the person that we as Atma are focusing on, but I wasn't quite sure the sort of hub and spoke component of this. And it's starting to come together now that we have both Erik and Lulu and their experiences and their space dives sort of under our belt, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So, but what ultimately happens, again, same as with Erik, Nirmala and Bosk show up. Yeah. And I believe does Nirmala or Raya?
Oh, which one?
Raya move.
Shuffles them away.
Yeah.
I don't remember. But we get like the transformation scene, just like we got with Erik. She turns into this bird monster person.
Yeah.
And we get the same kind of experience. We're like, we're shuffled away. The whole world kind of collapses and resets in a way.
Groundhog Day.
Yeah. And then do we wake up in the classroom one more time here?
I think... I don't remember.
Because the next person we meet is Marin.
Marin, yes.
Right?
And I do know I can't remember if this is one where we started with like a memory and then we cut away, but I do know that we very quickly go to base camp.
Yes. And this was shocking to me. So base camp is from the prologue. You might recall, like the base camp is kind of this safe place where Nirmala goes to write her stories. Mm-hmm. It's where Atma kind of hangs out. It seems like it looks like it's like an old subway car that has been abandoned in a park. That's kind of very like Boxcar Children-esque to me. And interacting with Marin, it's the first time that we see this place kind of again. We see base camp again, and we see that there's someone besides Nirmala and Atma that have been there, and it's Marin.
Yes. And it's really interesting because we see it and we do not believe, because Atma even says, I didn't think anyone else knew about this place. Mm-hmm. And Marin says, well, I'm very familiar with this place, but is reticent to tell us why. We don't know what history she has here, but we do get the magic wand from her, which is strange because we're like, how do you know about this?
How do you even know about this?
Yeah.
That's from my prologue memory.
Right. Like, what are you doing with this thing? And we learn a new skill, and that is to begin to open up rifts. So now we have somehow been able to, and Atma even says like, wait, what is magic? And Marin's like, now you're questioning magic. Like, what are you doing?
Exactly.
Which I thought was a really cute moment. And you can open up rifts to then travel, we think, back in time.
Yeah.
We're not quite sure, but we presume it's back in time. And we can tell because there's also a sepia tone to everything. It's a lot warmer. So it feels like an old photograph, memory. And when we do this, we learn that Marin is actually Raya's childhood best friend.
Yes.
And it all changed when Atma showed up.
It strikes you as the like, oh, she's kind of the good guy of the story. That's how I felt interacting with Marin. Like, this is someone who has Raya's best interests at heart.
Yes.
That's trying to do good.
Yep.
And there wasn't any of the kind of nefarious undertones that you got with Lulu and things like that. It's like, man, Raya actually, I took a note, like, she helped to decorate base camp.
Yes.
She is an active part of, like, someone that we believe is on Raya's side. And we're going to work together to try and fix this world, which is kind of falling apart around us.
Yes, yeah.
And fix the people in that world together, by helping them, like, by going in the past, like we go into the past, we space dive in the past, we help people resolve these like traumatic or bad experiences in the past, and that shifts the future.
Yes. And what's been happening up through, because we're in chapter 4 now, and in chapters 2 and 3, we do see ever so slight changes to the world.
Right.
Like the cinema becomes increasingly more dilapidated. Like it's been years since someone saw a movie there.
It's like, I just held my girlfriend's hand there.
We were like, we were over there just a second ago. And so at this point, when we're with Marin and we're trying to figure out where Raya is, there's debris flying. People are acting very strangely. They're talking about the festival, but it's almost like it's beyond glitches. They are behaving abnormally. They're doing these weird kind of poses, and it's almost like if this was any other game, I would be like, nope, I'm out of here because this feels like a horror game. Like this is very, very not right. Things are broken here.
Very broken. We re-meet the dojo master, the fighter guy.
Yes.
Who is one of my favorite characters in the whole game.
Oh my gosh.
So the guy who teaches you to fight in like chapter 1 or 2, in the arcade, and teaches you how to deal with the bullies or whatever. We meet him again, but he's struggling. He's not able to. He doesn't want to help you like fight your way through the crowd and get to Raya, and so we do like a series. There's a lot of time hopping in this chapter, but this is one that really stuck out to me.
I really liked it. Basically, you're moving through different places, and you're also moving through 3 different points in time. So this is the most complex puzzle that we've had to date in the game. And it feels very much like we're at the climax. Solving this is going to unlock really the big finale. And so that's the sense I got. I did feel like at this point I was so ready and excited to see what happened next. I was like, oh my gosh, I just want to move through this a little faster.
I'll just do it since you said that. I'll just do a quick timeout to talk about like the fetch quest type of game.
Yes.
I think this is actually why fetch quest games bother me sometimes, is because there is no sense of urgency.
Yeah.
You're Link, the world is ending, this monster is taking over this island, go find 17 ducks and bring them to this guy. And it's like, well, do it as fast as you can, but it's like, well, really you're in bullet time. You can go do anything you want in the town.
Right.
But it's like, things are literally falling from the sky, and yet you have to stop and like help this kid find his soccer ball from the past to connect him back with his dad and his past. Like it really affects the pacing of the story for me.
Yes.
And it's like, well, I understand that the narrative is telling me this is urgent, but the gameplay is telling me that, oh, you should take your time and do all of the quests.
Right. It almost felt like, I don't know if I would have maybe enjoyed if they had added one more chapter to make it feel like the chapters were a little shorter, but perhaps paced, like that would have altered the pacing for me.
Yep.
Where maybe we did those quests, but before all of the stuff with Raya happens.
Yep.
Because I still found, the space dive with the Doomsday Profiteer and his son really fascinating, and one of the more, for me personally, one of the more poignant ones, because his whole thing is, I think I ended up writing this down because I was like, this line just kind of broke my heart. We go to the microphone guy, and he basically is saying, I need to hustle. I need to provide for my family. This is why he's working so hard all of the time. And you ultimately have this kid, and he's like, my dad's not paying attention to me. I want to play ball. And you get the kid basically a Game Boy. I think they call it something different, but it's a Game Boy. And the kid says, like, I don't even need Papa anymore. And as a kid who grew up, with the Game Boy, with increasing screen time, and as a person who does use a lot of screen time, that idea of replacing just people, but also your family and your Papa with like, hey, well, I can find just as good entertainment on this screen. That like made me very, very sad. And the fact that the Papa saw this and said, well, don't let this distract you. What good is a father who can't provide? And then it goes into then you think about capitalism and the fact that this dad knows that and wants to spend time with his child, but realizes that the only ability for any kind of security, safety, mobility for his son is to make sure that he provides a stable lifestyle.
Yep.
And we see that also with Nirmala, because the dad talks about how the big thing he's angry about, and we realize it's probably a lot more than just this, but a lot of the inciting sort of point for anger is because he took out so many loans and he is in debt because he's trying to make sure Nirmala goes to a good school and gets good grades.
That's his perception.
That's his perception, right? And so this idea of again, this idea of men and masculinity and having to provide for your family, and that being the thing you must do to be acceptable in society. There's just a lot here. Oh my gosh. Oh.
That was so good. I did have a slightly different take on the Game Boy part. So totally agree with the dad part. Right on board with you there. I saw the Game Boy as being a way to connect the kid with his peers. So
yeah, that is true.
Because you learn that like all of the reason he doesn't have anyone to play soccer with him, football, is because all of his friends are playing Game Boy.
Yes.
And you give him the Game Boy, and I think you could make a case for like, so that he has something to like entertain him. He's not relying on his dad. Right. But I think for me, a generous read would be, this is going to allow him to connect with his friends in a way that he can't right now.
Yes. And I think both probably to an extent are true, because I think especially in the absence of a father figure or the family structure, it's like, as human beings, who do we turn to? You have your found family, you have your friends. And so I think absolutely that is right. But it did break my heart a little bit when a kid is just like, I don't need my dad anymore. It's like, oh man.
It was tough. I totally agree. I would love to hop back to the dojo guy for a second.
Yeah,
which was my favorite part, like puzzle for this particular chapter. You go back and like his dojo is struggling, and so it's going to close in the future. And essentially, like, you rewrite the past so that it doesn't close. And he like, some of the bullies, it turns out, will become his students, and then they'll help fight alongside of you. There is a really funny moment, which is like, it's just an Easter egg again. Like, there's so many funny references in this game.
Yeah.
But there is on the dojo, there are the words "strike later, strike soft, have mercy," which are the inverse of the Cobra Kai dojo from Karate Kid. And first of all, just a hilarious thing, because like you have to uncover that as part of resolving his like background. Is like, what's the expression on the wall here? But it was like, the whole essential point of the Karate Kid is that you should not strike first and strike hard and have no mercy. That's actually like the bully way to engage with the world.
Yeah.
And so seeing it like plainly spelled out as like, you can be like, in this case, like, it's a martial artist, and so dojo, they're teaching you martial arts, and yet it's being done in a way that is like, you are like, there's a way that you can approach this that doesn't make you the bully. And that idea of bullying, just kind of continuing that thread throughout, was like, I don't know, it was really important to me.
Yeah. I think that's a really, really good point. With that, we do another big fight. We now have not got an anime on our side, but we have a few dojo members and sensei with us. Did you get, as a side note, there was a memory that we unlock that I was wondering if you got. It's Atma sharing his bottle cap collection with Nirmala.
Yes.
I just wanted to, because I thought this moment was very, very sweet, and like got me. Because we learned that Nirmala, is really entranced by this bottle cap collection. When Atma says, "Oh, well, do you collect anything, or do you collect bottle caps?" We learned that Nirmala's dad threw her collection away. So again, this disregard for not only his daughter, in the sense of like not respecting, her desires as wanting to be an artist, but throwing away just things that she's interested in, which is, as a kid, like, what a violation of just your sense of self, right?
I used to have a Virtual Boy, which is one of Nintendo's like early failures as a console. It's like a red, like, think of like a VR headset that you just like stuck your face into, and everything that you saw was in like various shades of red on the
Yeah,
inside.
yeah.
And it had a controller that took, I think, either 6 or 8 AA batteries to work.
Oh my
And when I got tired of using the Virtual Boy, which did not take very long, I remember I would store things in the battery compartment of the Virtual Boy. That was my, like, I have 2
Whoa.
younger brothers, and so I didn't want them getting into my things. And so
Yeah.
that's where I would hide things, was in
Wow.
the remote control. I don't know at what point I shifted from hiding things to hiding money inside, but the day that we ended up selling the Virtual Boy at a garage sale, I happened to check the controller of my Virtual Boy, and I found, like, a lot of money for a kid inside
That's
there that I had totally
hilarious.
forgot that I had kind of squirreled away
Oh
inside.
my gosh. Also, what a great find. Like, it's like when you put on a jacket after a long winter and you're like, the first time you check your pockets and you find like a $10 or $5 or even $1, you're just like, oh, past me. Thank you.
Thank you, past me.
Yeah.
As we move more and more to digital currencies, it's maybe less time that we have those joyful pocket money moments.
Oh,
So,
that's so true.
R.I.P.
R.I.P. One other thing. Okay, so this, before
Yep.
we get further in the plot, because we're basically at the end of the chapter here. But there is one thing that we encounter is this white cow in a field. And that white cow basically says, hey, if you've pet like all the animals, you can pet the fluffiest one. And the first time I played, I was one short. I will say that. And it was the most heartbreaking thing. And that's when I knew I had to play the game again. And the second time through, I was able to successfully pet all the cats. And it brought me to a scene where it's such a lovely scene that's not critical to the game, but I think very important. And it makes me a little sad that it's like hidden behind that achievement, only because I think when I played it and got this bit of information, it hit and it made the conclusion feel a little different. So what I love is you go, when you've pet all the cats, you can space dive into the white cow or white ox or whatever the beast is. And you see this, I don't know what it is. It almost looked like the dancing dragons that you see in like the Chinese New Year festival, but it had, I think, more of a monkey face.
Okay.
So it was slightly different, but it had that kind of era of festivity and like opulence to it in its structure and its design. And it is, I think it was called Barong, and it was the basically the thing that said, hey, you've pet all the cats, and I'm kind of their representative, and they all love you for petting them and giving them names. And I wrote this down, and it said, they said, names have power almost like magic. It's the first step to understanding ourselves. Which is really significant because we're getting to the point in which the big twist happens. So I want to remember that quote because that is really important for how to understand what happens later in the game, the big reveal. But we also get a memory of Nirmala and Atma petting cats, and he asks her about her friends, and we reinforce again that she doesn't have friends. So going back to that Game Boy and that kid, where it's like, hey, that kid was able to create at least a structure of other friends outside of the family that was absent. Nirmala does not have that. So we're building, we have all these pieces. We haven't built the puzzle quite yet, but we have another piece. We also learn in this memory, Cat Wonderland was Atma's idea. So,
what?
Which changes the way you think about the movie theater scene in chapter 1, because Raya brings that up. And so now, here's the thing though. Atma made up Cat Wonderland when talking to Nirmala and talking about having friends and having this wonderful Cat Wonderland where you can have your friends. And we see it show up when Raya takes us to the movies. So
I cannot believe that. And then all the people in the movie theater start acting like cats afterwards.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Oh, now I'm doubly pissed that I didn't pet all the animals.
It really affects, especially now that I've played it once and I was playing it again to get this achievement, it really changed and like added a lot of depth to my feelings about the game and its conclusion and everything that they were saying. Oh,
So can we talk about the end of chapter 4? Because this is something that like
yes.
I did not understand, and I'm wondering if maybe like, you picked up on
Yeah.
it. So we go through a very similar experience
Mm-hmm.
with Marin that we did with Lulu and Erik,
Mm-hmm.
where we do the space dive thing. She transforms into a giant snail. You know, she
Yes.
gets disintegrated or whatever
Yeah.
happens. I did not understand where things soured with Marin. So, like, you
Yes.
understand what happened with Erik, you understand what happened with Lulu, and the thing for me with Marin was maybe it was just like Marin just was not able to meet the needs that Raya had, and that was okay, sure, but like I couldn't tell if there was something more specific that I was just there was subtext that I was missing there.
Yeah, I think for me and what I interpreted, so Marin A has more resources and opportunity than Nirmala. So I think even though they're best
Mm,
friends, there is a tension there where they both love to create and write and draw and color. And where Marin was like, hey, I could ask my dad for more coloring stuff because they'll just get it for me because they're excited for me that I found a passion. Nirmala says, I can't ask my dad for that. He doesn't even want me to do this. And so, even though they're best friends, there is this tension because of the just ability to access and the support they have from
mm,
family. But also, I think it's in this chapter that we see it, and we definitely see it closer to the conclusion of the game. Marin has opportunities to step in when Lulu and the other kids are bullying
that's right.
yeah, when they're bullying
Okay.
Raya.
Yeah.
And so there is guilt on Marin's side for not stepping up for her friend, and I think there is resentment from Raya from the fact that not only did I introduce you to this world of art and drawing and creating stories, but you weren't there for me when I needed
Yeah.
it, and you said you were my best friend.
Okay, yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense. Thank you.
um what I thought was really interesting too was when Marin gets changed into the snail. We get a line, and I forget. I didn't write down who said this, um, but we do get a scene where Marin in high school is asking Raya. Um, Raya. I keep saying Raya because Ray, and
That's how
I
I
think
read
it's
it while I was
Raya.
playing, and
Yeah,
then when we talked to Demas, he
I
said
know.
Raya,
I'm
and
just like, ah.
yeah.
So sorry. I know I keep switching back and forth, but my brain is also trying to hold these other thoughts in my head. When we see Raya and Marin talking, and Marin asks Raya, why doesn't she go by Nirmala anymore?
That's right. This is the big reveal.
This is the big reveal because now we know that Raya and Nirmala are one and the same. And that line that I saw my second playthrough about names, what is it? They said names have power almost like magic is the first step to understanding ourselves. And we see it in movies like Spirited Away, right? When Chihiro's name gets taken away and she becomes Sen.
Sen. That's
There's
right.
power in knowing who you are, knowing your name, and having like that sense of identity. And in changing how she was referred to by her fellow classmates, by everyone in the world, I mean, there's some stuff happening with Raya.
A quick text-to-text connection here.
Yeah.
We both read Name of the Wind and
Yes.
The King Killer Chronicle.
Yes.
One of my still like my leading theories of what's happening is that Kvothe, the main character, who now goes by Coat, the bartender, the reason that he's lost his powers and the reason that he isn't the same anymore is because he changed his name. So anytime someone is changing names, and it like that name has meaning, I am always into those stories. Like Name of the Wind is a great example. The Earthsea series is a great example. Like something about like the power of names that when that gets referenced, I always am just like I'm instantly in.
But also it's so important, when a person gets your name wrong, right? How do you like that is one of the worst feelings. If your boss calls you by the wrong name, or if your parent calls you by your full name, it's the differences in who and how they say your name. It's so huge. And so even if you're not changing your name, from Raya to Nirmala, like that's a pretty significant change, it feels like. But if someone calls me Jenny versus calling me Jennifer, or before, calling me Jen, depending on who they are and their tone, like all of those feel so very different. In some ways really great, in some ways very demeaning. Or if they call me Jessica, that's a whole nother thing. And names are powerful.
Oh.
That's why, like, as teachers, you know, oh man, it drove me wild. There was one teacher I worked with who didn't really make a point to like memorize the names of their students until like they're just like, it'll happen. I'll just that. And I was like, that is number one.
Don't be that
the
teacher,
The worst
everyone.
thing as any teacher could do is not immediately know the names of all their students. You have those classlets ahead of times. You have the photos for most of your students from the yearbook. Memorize those names, because it's especially for a kid who's already struggling. Like kids, they're developing their identity. The least you can do is get their name right, or call them how they want to be called. Use the pronouns that they want them to be used, you know?
When I was an assistant principal back at a K through 12 school, the administrators, not even the teachers, the administrators had a contest every year to see who could memorize all like 600 students' names first. And we would have to we'd have to prove it. So we'd go to lunch one of the days. No, it was happened during the students' lunch. So like the administrators would go to the lunchroom and we'd sit down and we would just point to every single student and try and name every single one of them. And it was like, anyone who didn't have it down in the first month of school, it was like shame. Like, even if like teachers, yes, of course, but even like administrators and school employees that are not teachers, like, man, the power of saying like, we are in community together. We are in the same space for 8 hours a day. Like, there is power in knowing students' names. Granted, if you're in a school that has 2,000 kids instead of 600, different story. I understand. But there's something about just like having the power of that name. I totally agree.
Absolutely. And we get the lines at this point because now we know that the perceptions or the transformations that we see, and I think it's Nirmala or Bosk that says this, but like, this is not Marin, you know, this isn't Erik, this isn't Lulu, this is Raya's perception of them twisted by jealousy, and her constant denial is hurting her.
I wrote the same in the same sequence as Raya has to be able to face the things she's kept inside all this time.
Absolutely.
So like all of this. So this is your like big spoiler moment for the whole game. Every single thing that we have experienced since we like drowned at the beginning of the game has not been like based in a physical reality. It has all been inside Raya's mind, grown up Nirmala, or teenage Nirmala. And every character that we meet is a part of her subconscious. Every piece of drama that we meet is something that maybe it happened in the real physical world somewhere, but more than anything, like, there's probably some connection back to Raya that she is working through in this moment.
And I think it's kind of interesting considering we played To the Moon last month, because also there's this element of this is her perception of what happened. This is her perception of how people are treating her. And it doesn't make it any less real. But you also start thinking about how does the way that she is already dealing with a lot of family troubles, the way that she is dealing now, we learn with the loss of Atma, how is that coloring her interactions with other people and affecting the way that she is interpreting some of the events that are happening? And you know, we don't know at this point.
And in chapter 5, right, the central premise is like, we are outside of this like mental space. Like, everything is ethereal. Everything is very abstract going forward for the most part. You talk with child Nirmala. And you talk with Bosk, who's essentially like her avatar to help you through this. And Nirmala has this line that I thought was like, this must have come straight from the psychiatrist. I just want her to pay attention to me. That's Nirmala talking about Raya. And this is the thing, like, for those of us who have experienced childhood trauma or even just like significant roadblocks growing up, you have to, like, I'll say you have to, like, this has been my experience, disclaimer, asterisk, you have to address that inner child if you're going to heal from it and move forward as an adult. And that line to me was the line that said, like, I'm glad that Dimas told us that they had a psychiatrist on staff, because I was like, either someone did their homework or there's someone who like is in the profession that helped with this part of the game, because it is that is what you are doing. Like this entire game is you working through these childhood traumas for this now teenage Raya.
Yes. And I think one important question that Dimas brought up and that we have kind of skirted around as we've talked today is the question of how do you help someone who may not be willing to help themselves or is not prepared to see what they need to do to help themselves. And at this point, it's really becoming crystal clear. We have Atma, we have Nirmala, and they're both trying to find ways to get through to Raya and heal her. But at this point, Raya says it wants none of it. Raya has created additional, like I called it shadow Atmas. Raya's created additional shadow Atmas to just try and make sure that the world that she's created in her mind is as perfect and close to the bucket list that they created at the start of the game.
Yes.
As can possibly be.
So to kind of skip ahead so that we can come back to this moment, like in physical reality,
yes,
you're going to wake up the player as Raya in a hospital, right?
Yeah.
So I guess kind of the implication, just to make sure that like we're all moving together here, is like this is almost like you are there's a comatose patient and this is all happening within that like mental space. Is that kind of how you thought about this experience?
Yes. Yeah. And so at the end of the game, when you wake up and you see the hospital light and you see Raya's mom, my first thought was like, was there maybe an incident of like self-harm? Did something happen where Raya was basically at the point of giving up? And that was the fracturing of the mind, as you saw the almost like the manifestation of what was happening physically in her mind as everything was breaking apart and she was choosing maybe not to go on. Yes.
And this is where like I brought this question at the very, very beginning, which is like this question around like, who are you in the future? I'm wondering if maybe there was like this is totally conjecture. There's no like evidence for this, but like one of the things I was wondering is like maybe within her high school experience with everything else that had happened with like the real life Erik and the real life Lulu and the real life Marin, I was wondering if there had been an assignment recently that was like, make your future plans, and that was maybe one of the triggering events, because it felt like it was such a like important part of chapter 1, and then you just kept getting callbacks to it. I think one of the codes that you uncover in chapter 5 is on the piece of paper. That piece of paper is one of the things that helps the teacher realize he's not in the military. Like it just seems like that element comes through more and more. I think I even wrote like there was a line. It was the same thing, right? Like we talked about this earlier. You shouldn't miss this kind of opportunity to plan for your future. Like this idea of like, how do you grow and how do you move forward when you have such significant trauma and baggage behind you?
Well, and that makes total sense when we think about everything that the memories have focused on. It's all sitting in the past. It's all sitting in the 90s. It's like she's not ready to move on past the point in which a lot of these earlier childhood traumas have happened. She can't move on beyond it. And so I think that is a really good and very likely hypothesis. It makes sense to me. Absolutely.
So I have a question for you. And we didn't really talk about many of the mechanics of chapter 5. I think you should play it and experience it. Like it's a really like, it's a very diverse experience. It pulls like everything that you did throughout the game earlier as like one shots. You do it all together. And I think it was like a really clever way to do that. I'd like to ask you, I'd like to step back and ask you a question. And you could think of this as potentially multiple choice.
Oh God.
The question is, who is the Unbound? I'm going to read you a couple things. Okay. So in favor of Atma, there is a quote from the game where it says, he is a specimen unbound by the laws of reality who cannot perish in this realm, Raya's mind. You're the only person that isn't bound by the world of illusions. Okay. Now for Raya. There's a line that says, Raya is unbound from physical reality. The townsfolk are not physically real people in the game, 98% of the game. They are unbound from the physical reality. They are not bound by that reality. They are creations. So let's pause there. So like thoughts on like, who is the Unbound?
Okay. I'm going to take that and take one step
Take
back.
Take it further back.
Because I think the idea of like breaking down the title in particular and the word choice is really, really important and really, really a wise thing to do. Because space and unbound are both very significant and words that you would not use else, they're not filler words. What I think is also interesting is we have the Magic Red Journal. And I think immediately when I hear Unbound, I think of books and the unbound nature of this journal and how the pages were torn apart. And you're also trying to piece it back together.
That's so good. That is so good.
So I think there's multiple level. I think all of the above. Is there an E, all of the above?
Well, the Unbound could be a plural, right?
Right. That's true. So, and I think, again, in terms of space, it's not only thinking of there is physical space that we are, it's in the mind, but in our experience of it, it's a physical space in which we're navigating. But also it probably, in my opinion, alludes to the mental space that you have to provide for yourself to be able to work through a lot of these issues.
Oh my God, Jenny, that is so good. Let me add to your space point.
Yes,
because that was going to be the second part of my question.
Yeah.
So Bosk says that these people aren't real. They're just fragments of the North princess's memory, completely detached, unbound from reality. But there's also a quote that says, "Moving on isn't the same as forgetting me. I'll always be here right where you left me." So this idea of space being a physical part, like the where. I'm right here. I am in you. I am in this space. So yeah, let's talk about like the space versus the unbound. Like what are you thinking with all of this?
Okay, so there's so much. Okay. Especially when approaching grief. Grief is a really interesting feeling and process because sometimes grief ebbs with time. The further you get away from a loss, oftentimes the more you're able to process it, the more you're able to work through it and go about daily life and move on. At the same time, grief has this really nasty habit of like punching back in moments and almost negating the space that you had from whatever happened. And so I think we know that Raya is dealing with grief, dealing with the loss of a friend she held very dear in Atma. And so it's really interesting because she is unable to give that space to process the grief. She's holding Atma so close because she's afraid of what's happening if she provides that space. In my opinion, I think.
Oh, y'all getting this?
This is you're asking the good questions.
This is incredible. Oh.
But yeah, I'm curious where you were going also and what you were thinking as you were playing this.
So I am torn on a very practical question that will influence my answer to this, and I'd love to get your thoughts.
Yeah.
Is Atma a ghost? Oh, stay with me. Real Atma dies
right
at the beginning of the game. And we learned that Atma was a person. Yes. Atma was a runaway homeless youth that ran away from his family, was essentially, it sounds like, living in the base camp and wanted to be a writer, had this passion on writing, struck up this unlikely friendship with this this child, Nirmala, and then eventually we know will die. And you don't see Atma again after Raya wakes up in the hospital.
Right.
And so my wondering is Atma a literal ghost that is interacting with comatose Raya and helping her as an outside entity? The game keeps telling us that he is outside, that he is different than the constructs inside Raya's mind. But we never see him again afterwards.
Right.
And so either A, he is a ghost and he is interacting in this kind of psychological space with Raya to help her move through this stuff. Or B, he is also a construct for Raya that she has created within her own mind. And so I guess my answer to who is the Unbound really depends on the answer to that question. So I'd love to get your theory. You landed on ghost Atma or construct Atma? Or something totally different.
I personally, I toyed with both of those as well. And I personally enjoy the path of taking construct Atma. I enjoy thinking about Atma being a real person that had left such a mark on Raya and Nirmala that she wasn't able to really, especially at the young age and with what she was dealing with, that she really felt especially guilty about what happened. And so she maintained that construct of him in her mind. And he became almost like an imaginary friend ghost that she held on to for so long. That was what my interpretation was.
That's so interesting. So you find it almost like an encouraging idea that Atma, physical Atma, made such an impact that he is now imprinted on her subconscious and then becomes a construct.
That was what my idealistic self was hoping.
You know, for me, it's the inverse. Like for me, like I'm not sure which one is true,
right.
but I am almost more encouraged by the idea that some outside entity came and helped work through this stuff alongside Raya.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that it's like the thing that we both find hopeful is kind of the inverse scenario.
Yeah.
There. Get in the comments. Let us know.
Do you think?
Do you find it more encouraging? Ghost Atma, Construct Atma, some other Atma that we haven't thought of? I'm super curious about this.
Yeah, because also. Because in both situations, because Atma is real. Like, he was a real person. And for me, there was a brief moment where I was like, was Atma ever even real? And I think that's disproven in the game, but I don't remember specifically how. But there was a brief moment, because you're talking about what's an alternative to Ghost or Construct. And there was a point in time where I was like, maybe he was entirely a construct and never real in the first place.
Yeah. No, I think they leave that a question.
Yeah.
Because like Marin specifically says like, who is this person?
There's no Atma.
Yeah, exactly. Like it sounds like it's a made up person. So
right.
I don't know. I think the game kind of leaves that a bit ambiguous.
Yeah.
If you go back and listen to our interview with Dimas, we ask who the hero of the game is. And he does say that even though the game explicitly calls Atma the hero multiple times, that it's really Raya saving herself.
Well, okay, so spoilers for a decades-old game at this point, Final Fantasy X. But that's I firmly am like, we are the vessel through which we see the story, but this is Raya's story, right? Raya for me is absolutely the protagonist, and it's very much the feeling I get when I play Final Fantasy, or that you're, I think, supposed to. It's designed that you get when you play Final Fantasy X, because this is Yuna's story in Final Fantasy X. She is the one that everything centers around, and you as Tidus are the playable character, but this is ultimately not your story.
Ooh.
And also, there's some really interesting parallels in what Tidus ends up being at the end of Final Fantasy X. 10-2 maybe changes things a little bit, but at the end of 10, you also are curious about Tidus and whether or not, is he real? Is he a construct? Is all of that stuff.
Just a quick list, because as I was prepping for today's conversation, I was thinking through all the like movies that I love that play on this idea. So I'll just like rapid fire my top 4 that kind of use this kind of setup. Quick caveat: I have not rewatched many of these in years, so I don't know if any of them have problematic things in them. Like by today's standards, most of them are relatively old. The Machinist with Christian Bale, big one for sure. Fight Club, very popular, obviously. Donnie Darko was one that was one of my favorites growing up, and also one that Dimas referenced. And I'll also throw in Pan's Labyrinth as one that kind of references and leaves you guessing like how much of this is a physical reality and how much of this is within the character, a child's mind.
Man, I loved Pan's Labyrinth. That's one that I can't watch very often. It's like you don't watch that all the time. You watch that like once every a couple of years.
Yeah, for sure.
So as we're basically at the end of the game, and I wanted to highlight two scenes. The first is as you are going into your final showdown with Sorry, I'm getting excited, so I'm losing my place. When you are headed to your final showdown with Raya, you see Bosk is with you, and you see Admiral.
Admiral, yeah.
And so you have this scene where you are trying to run towards Raya and get to her to try and save her. And you have these two giant gargoyle cats fighting in the background because Admiral wants you to step away. Like, let her do her thing. Let her live in this state of happiness.
Yeah.
Quote
happiness.
And oh my gosh, this scene it got my blood pumping. I was so excited because you see the like flashes of light as they like come together and pull away. It feels like you're in the middle of an anime.
I recorded so much of that experience for myself to rewatch. It is so cool. And it's like almost like that Dragon Ball Z thing where you see like lines flashing in the background. It's like, I can't even keep up with them. They're at a power level way beyond what I can see. Like that's how you feel like watching that in the background. It was very cool.
It's incredible. And there's this kind of humorous because both of them ended up getting so tired. And then I think Bosk was like, get us some fancy feast. Yes. And then they're like, yeah, we're just gonna eat fancy feast, you go ahead.
The most cat-like ending to that conflict.
Oh my gosh. So I really, really appreciated that. And then we face Giant Raya, which I really loved the epicness, but I think this was also one battle where I'm like, oh, I wish the battle had been just a little shorter because I was ready to hit the end of the story.
I agree.
And I actually ended up because I was playing this on my Steam Deck and the screen's a little bit smaller and I kind of misjudged a couple of my steps and got like knocked out. And I had to redo a couple parts and I was just like ready to be in the finale.
I did not realize until like my 8th try fighting giant blue Raya, which was a gorgeous scene, by the way.
Oh yeah.
I did not realize that if you look for the shadows of the falling things, you can guess where they are falling.
Yeah.
And so I kept trying to see them fall from the top of the screen and move out of the way in time.
Oh,
but,
you did it on hard mode.
Well, yeah, and people called this out in our Discord that it's kind of frustrating how slowly you walk and move in this game. But like if you're trying to dodge things falling from the sky as soon as you see them on the screen, there is no way you're getting out of the way in time. So yeah, I totally agree. Eventually I figured out like, wait, there are shadows. You can figure out where these things are falling and I could beat it. But
yes. Yep. Nope. Nothing to add there. I feel that completely. And so we go through this battle and through it, Raya is basically like saying, why can't you just be happy? Why can't you just let me sit in this? Why can't you just sit in this? Why are we fighting? Why are we doing this, my love? You know, and she's saying all this stuff and it sounds great, but we know that this is not truly happiness for her. And what ends up happening is we defeat her in this battle and we enter a void. And when we look for her in this black void with the blue lights going, we find her as giant Raya curled up in a ball, like just this statue, like curled up in a fetal position. Yeah. And we get the opportunity to do a space dive deeper into her psyche, and that brings us to her house and the source of so much of the trauma and so much of her pain that she's holding on to, and we learn all about her family life.
Can I just add, like, this specific moment was a point where I felt like the game was training real-life Joel for how to talk to someone who is going through traumatic experiences. Basically, like, you go through a series of dialogue as you enter her childhood home, where you try to talk with her and try and, like, say, like, let's come out of this together. And if you choose the wrong dialogue path, it kind of restarts you in the scene. And you go through this, like, a couple times. And it was one of those things where there were times where I said things that I thought sounded good of the dialogue options, but they'd say like, you know, don't give me that like Pollyanna gift card, a greeting card line. Like that's not, I am trying to be kind to myself. Like, okay, cool. Right. Thanks for telling me that. And so I felt like it was one of those moments where they like think about like what games can do. If a game can help us kind of subconsciously learn how to talk to someone that's having like a serious emotionally traumatic experience or episode, like, wow, like what a powerful thing for them to put in a game.
Right. This part, like by this point of the game, I was just kind of crying as I was playing.
This was the moment that got
like,
me, for sure.
I was like trying to see through the tears, trying to just get through this. Because Yeah, it's incredibly difficult. And Raya she keeps saying, like, leave me alone. Like, go away. You're going to leave anyways. Why do you even bother coming back? Like, there is this, like, unwillingness still to just to let someone in. And what really got me was when Atma was like, well, I'm just going to sit downstairs and, like, I'll be here. Just whenever you need me, but I'm just going to be here. And it's this whole idea of sometimes, especially when you're going through something hard, like hearing things from people, not helpful, but just the willingness of people to hold space with you is so important. And I thought this game, like, I got so choked up and I was just crying at this point.
This, like I said, this is the moment that got me as well. Like, emotionally helped me like really feel impacted. So I think for this audience, for this podcast audience especially, if you are readers, I would highly recommend the book Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, which is about two people that are founding a video game company and making video games together. And they, you weave in and out of their personal lives and the traumatic experiences that they've had and are having. And they also, that scene reminded me so much of two scenes from this book where the characters learn how to just be present for each other during these hard moments. And so if you also found yourself particularly moved by this scene, I'd highly recommend that you check out the book, especially if you like video games, which if you're in this podcast, I sure hope so, because if you don't, I don't know what.
The last couple hours have been maybe a waste.
Yeah, maybe not a great use of your time, but happy to have you here. Now that I've isolated our audience.
Yeah, no, I'm like, maybe they're just like listening about games. And at one point, Atma asks, and this goes back to what you were saying about the future, right? Because Atma asks Raya, well, what do you want?
Yeah.
And Raya says, I don't know. And it really struck me because, especially at this point, Raya, she has basically constructed herself to be what she thinks and knows that society expects of her, that her father wants from her, that her mother wants from her. She's not herself. She has separated her true self. And, like, I mean, we didn't talk about it, but there's a scene where we see the moment where Raya basically, when she's a kid as Nirmala, pulls that side of herself out and physically says, I am no longer you be gone. And that's the first time she actually uses her power to, like, disappear people, is when she disappears that core part of herself, the creative, inquisitive, kind of weird side of herself. And she even says something like, I think she says, I want to be just a normal girl. Like, I just want to be normal, not lonely or delusional, and someone who killed her only friend. And that's the first time we see the blue. And it's so heartbreaking because she doesn't know she doesn't know herself. She has lost sight of it. And so when you ask a question like, well, what helps? What do you want me to do? What do you want? How could she answer that if she doesn't really know herself anymore?
Yeah. Total disassociation, fully out your mind.
Yep. Oh.
Yeah, I think, again, like, it's a moment where we start, the game has done they did their homework. They really tried to make sure that this was not a cheap ploy or using these kind of dissociative events as a trope, but more so showing you how it's not until you start reconciling these things that happen within your past that you can actually start moving forward. And I think that that idea and how this game talks about, like, what is growth, I think it really comes through clearly in moments like this.
Yeah. And we do get to the point where Raya is outside of the room, is sitting on the roof. Atma is able to join her. And this interaction happens, and it's bittersweet. Because Raya asks, like, well, what makes you happy? And Atma's like, the little things. And Raya even comments, like, your bucket list was things like bottle caps. And, these little things are making you happy. And, these ordinary things are something that brings joy. And I think that's such an important thing to remember. Again, I know when I think about the future, I tend to think about the big things, the big trips, the big goals. And it's important to remember the little ordinary everyday things that impact you and make you happy. And then she asks, well, what makes you sad? Or I think Atma asks it. They ask it of each other. And Atma says you have the options to pick from a few different things. And when asked, Raya says, well, you make me happy, but you aren't here anymore, and I'm alone and scared. And in this makeshift world of mine, there doesn't have to be sadness.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, this inability, like we were talking about, this concept of even mental space, being afraid to give that mental distance and space away from Atma because he is the one thing that brought her joy. And it's like, well, if she lets it go, what else is there?
Yeah, yeah. Man, it's just the way they have allowed us to consider in a physical way so many of the abstract emotions and feelings that affect us, are the human experience.
Right.
That's a really an incredible thing for a game to be able to pull off.
It is. One thing that I thought of actually when I was playing this, and the conversation especially that they have on the rooftop, is from the movie Inside Out at the very end, because the premise of the movie is you have each of these core emotions and they're very isolated, and you have, if you're feeling joy, that's only joy. If you're feeling sadness, that's only sadness. And again, sorry, spoilers for a decades old movie at this point. At the end of the movie, because the character in which these emotions are housed in, she basically learns to feel bittersweet, which is the combination of sadness and joy. And this is kind of what is happening with Raya, where she's learning that things can't just be happy all the time. There has to be space for sadness. Because that allows you to feel those happy moments a little bit more, but also you can hold both in the same memory and in the same grasp.
I love it. So good.
Again, Inside Out, great movie.
That was the first movie I saw when I moved to Portland. Fun fact, everyone.
That is really cool. Full circle moment.
Full circle moment, and now here we are.
Yes. Well, and we have sort of the full circle moment in the game showing up now, because Atma hands the magic red journal to Raya and says, all right, this is yours. Now it's time for it to go back to its rightful owner. And we space dive. I think this is the last time in the game we space dive. And we go on a journey. We go on a little walk. And at this point, I am ugly crying. I am red-faced. Tears are falling on the screen. Like, I'm just bawling at this point.
Is this the moment where you're walking with her kind of huddled and you're kind of...
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the music is swelling. You are walking through the sky. You're walking through storms.
Yeah.
What was it that like really stood out to you about this experience?
So referring to another game that's again an older game, but there's a game called Bastion. And it came out many years ago, but the premise is the world has been fractured by a calamity. And in that game, as your character walks around, stones pop back up and you see the world physically coming back together piece by piece. It's a very good game. Honestly, we should probably play it.
Okay.
Note for later. And when I saw the first steps that Raya and Atma take sort of into this cloud, getting ready to go in the void and kind of do the final confrontation with all of the people in her psyche. And you see the stones coming up and you see basically the idea of this fractured mind starting to rebuild and starting to heal. It just got me. What about you?
I think for me, similarly, like this whole ending sequence was the thing that like really like emotionally moved me. I think the rest of the game, like it felt like it was all questions and like not, it wasn't focused on the answers. And now that I had the answers, I could allow myself a little bit more emotional space to engage with what was actually happening to the characters. And I think that was it for me, is like the amount of hope for this character that like, we are on the climb up now. We have identified, like we have the answers to like what has been going on in this story all along. And now it's just a matter of time for us to like start moving forward. Yeah. And if there's one thing that's going to get me beyond like a sad moment, it's when a sad moment turns into like, and now I'm moving forward. And that's what like really hit me about that scene.
Oh, it's incredible. And I think what's really nice, whether or not Atma is a figment, construct, ghost, part of her imagination, what does matter to me is also that she did not necessarily, she's doing this on her own in the real sense, but mentally she's not. And it just reinforced that idea of community where maybe you don't need someone to like do the thing for you, but however someone can help, whether it's by like holding your shoulder as you're taking the walk, like that really struck me that she didn't take the walk by herself.
Yeah.
Oh, feelings. So many feelings.
There were some big feelings there.
Oh my gosh. And so we go on this walk and we basically go down the list of every person, you know, that has provided us with grievance, with stress, with trauma.
Yeah.
Starting with Erik.
That's when he says the line about like, we're more similar than you thought or whatever. And I think like, obviously, I think in the physical reality world, Erik was also likely a victim of abuse, and it sounds like probably did kill her cat in real life.
Yes,
that was the vibe that I got.
That is still very messed up.
Yeah, that was a hard scene, for sure. And oh man, you know what's interesting? That's the cat that was kind of her guide. Like her cat was Admiral, right? So like when the two big cat avatars are fighting, it's the one that was like murdered by Erik that is Raya's. So wow, another important part of foreshadowing there. But yeah, that was the moment for me, and I was like, I don't forgive you, Erik. But
the thing is, and this is what I loved too, because Raya doesn't either. She's like, I'm going to try, but this is not like will not just instantly forgive you. And I loved that.
Yes, same.
Because if they had made it so Raya was like, now everything's hunky-dory, I would have been immediately just pulled out of my emotional state. But because she's like, I don't right now, but I'm really going to do my best to provide you that forgiveness and try, like that hit me even harder than if it was a perfect quote ending.
I think for me, that moment stood out in particular because when I read it at first, my like male manipulator alarm was going off that like this guy is just asking for this so that he can get back with her. And it wasn't until I had to like stop myself and be like, wait a second, no. This is the construct.
Yeah.
This is not the real dude. This is a part of herself that she is trying to engage with.
Right.
And it's still causing her pain. And so she has to acknowledge that it's still causing her pain.
Right.
That cat is not actually by her side.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah. It's so good. And we go down and we do the same thing for everyone else. We have Lulu, we have Marin, and we have mom and dad there. Oh, that was so rough. That was hard.
That was hard. The parent part was hard, but that the mom was the first person you see when you wake up. It was like this moment of like, it felt like the sky after a rain, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of how I felt when you woke up after that.
Oh, it was, it made me very happy to see the mom part of me. As we were waking up, there was this split second flash of, oh my gosh, if we see like the dad, I don't know. I was like, I don't know who I want to see, but I knew I was relieved when the mom was there.
Oh yeah. I did not want to see the dad.
No, yeah.
Not
I was
interested in that.
Yeah. It's like no one else in the village would have made sense. And it had to be her mom because her mom, we don't know or learn a ton other than she's also been subject to this abuse from her father and from her husband. And so the fact that there's this like ability for both of them to start moving on, that fresh start, oh my gosh, that was so powerful. We even get a moment with the cats.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I have to admit, anything with cats will wreck me, like pets, animals. I'm I'm too weak for that. And there is a line that the cat gives where I just got wrecked. I forget if it was Admiral or Bosk, but one of them says it's a cat's greatest sadness that we must often leave before our time. And I was just like, don't look at me. I can't do this. 'Cause just pets in general, like,
my dog Margot is 13 and was just diagnosed with arthritis like 3 weeks ago. And so when I read that line, all I could do was think about that. And I was like, no, I can't. I don't want to think about this right now. I don't want to think about that. It was very real.
Yeah, same. Well, and like Rosie, she's like 16, 17. So she's getting quite old in cat years. And like she doesn't have arthritis, but I can tell, she's like looking a little bit skinnier because she's just older. She's moving a little bit more slowly in the mornings. Her hops aren't very, always that most agile. And so, there's this sense of, I think a lot of times when we're faced with grief, especially as humans, and when we're kids, a lot of times the first loss we experience is one of a pet. And so I think that also just really hit me when it's like when that cat said that. It was just too much. I was already crying, but that started another wave of tears.
Yeah, and I think like this is a good moment for us to just like let everyone at home know that like the point of this podcast is that we are getting into games in a very like critical and intentional way, and that's going to require us to connect to like personal things that are happening.
Absolutely.
That's why we have kind of this Discord community. People are sharing about their experiences and a chance to respond like newsletters. If you have things that you want to put in comments, that is of course acceptable as much as you are comfortable with. But I think it's important that if we're going to talk about these games that are tackling emotional issues, we're going to have to sometimes talk about like hard things and like hard things in real life.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think that's what makes these things powerful, right? Because whatever medium it is, book, movie, game, they are an avenue for us to share an experience and then open up about our own.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're 100% right. And then we take this journey and essentially we keep ascending and wake up in the hospital. And that's the end of chapter 5. we have done it. Things aren't 100% better, but we have the ability to move on. And I think that's the big thing, is that there is going to be a future for Raya.
Yeah. And you get to see her on the bridge again, which is like the bridge scenes always, like I took a picture of every one of them. They were just like really like a beautiful like way to illustrate the space and time that we were in. It was really powerful to me.
Yeah. In the epilogue, and I can't remember if I call it epilogue or chapter 6 when we play it as a community, but in that epilogue, we do have the opportunity to see, we don't know how many years later, but some significant time has passed. Raya and her mom are packing up and getting ready to move out of the house. And Raya even says, I hope the next people who live in this house have better memories of it than I do.
Yeah.
Which, relatable. And you get an opportunity to walk through the town one last time and see everyone in the village who's impacted you in the subconscious, I guess for the first time in real life.
In real life, in the real physical space.
Yeah.
Was there anything about that moment that like really stood out to you?
I think just the nature of change and of time moving forward. What was really interesting is we've spent so much time in this city, seeing the ways that it had become different, more modernized in some respects. The bridges were updated. There were new shops, more food carts. The pastry chef did pursue Chinese cuisine.
Yeah.
There's these little details about how life keeps moving on that just became really poignant to me as we were walking through, and seeing also all of your friends, or not friends, but people you saw in the constructs.
Yeah.
Sorry, the outside noise distracted my brain for a little bit. The people that you saw in the construct, seeing them in their older sense of selves and their older selves was really healing in some way.
Yeah.
Because we've gone through this journey. We've had sort of this experience of them treating Raya poorly, and as a player we're defending her this entire time, so seeing this growth was really powerful.
Yes, that makes total sense. And I think for me, just like being back in the physical reality, like you're in the same town that you started in the prologue, right? Instead of the map that we had all memorized from like playing through chapters 1 through 5, you're back in the prologue map. And I think connecting it back, like it's the prestige, right? Like it's bringing everything back to where we started, that like hero's journey, that cycle. Like though she is now ready to move on to the next place, I think recentering back where we started, there's something about that shows it's like there's some connection between your place and how you heal. And so for me, that was like that was what really stood out about that moment.
Yeah. I'm curious, as you walked through and chatted with everyone, was there anyone that stood out in particular? Did you feel any specific way as you went through the community members?
I don't really remember. I'm bad with memorizing things like this, and in general, and I don't know. I don't recall. So was there something that stood out for you?
I think just one of the interactions that really stood out, just because I kind of chuckled at it, at the honesty of Raya. But when we talk to Lulu, Lulu starts bringing up like, oh, so-and-so is doing this now and so-and-so doing that now. And Raya just interrupts Lulu and is like, I don't really care about them. They were never my friends.
Yep.
And that straightforwardness and that blunt honesty, I found very amusing, and I was honestly kind of proud of her for just being like, that's not for me, but I would love to hang out with you someday.
Yeah.
And so it was nice to see them again. What happens when you grow out of high school and you move into college and you start seeing people outside of the lens of being in that school system?
Yeah.
And it was, I really liked their interaction. I liked that Erik was petting a cat, and, you know, you could sense, you know, they weren't best friends, but
Sure.
Just seeing Erik look a little bit more healed, he looks a little bit happier. So you wonder what maybe happened to Erik, that hopefully something good happened where he has grown up and is able to come out of what was a pretty unhappy childhood and maybe be happier as an adult.
That's really good. Yeah, I'm glad you called those out.
Yeah. But we're on the bridge and the credits roll, and I'm curious, you probably didn't get the true ending after the credits,
I didn't
right?
get it. No.
Okay, and I'll only share it because I went back, played it, tried to 100% it because I heard there was a true ending, and I was like, I bet you it's, if I 100% everything, I'll get it, so I'm going to do that. And what's really sweet is that after the bridge scene, when the credits roll, Raya in the epilogue picks up some flowers and takes those flowers to the dock where everything began, and basically has this last conversation. Oh, I'm getting choked up.
Oh no.
Has this last conversation with Atma.
Oh no.
And so, you know, and she says, you know, the world, everything's changing, the world's really different, but I imagine you'd tell me like to keep moving forward, and that's what's going to happen. And it's just such a beautiful, just like closure to everything. I just had to share it because it was, again, I was bawling this entire time. Like, this is basically an hour of me just straight crying through this game. It was beautiful.
Oh my word. Ugh. I'll have to hop on YouTube and see if I can find a version of that. Because wow, that sounds like a really nice bow to put on the whole experience.
And it's still, I think even without that, I felt personally very satisfied by the main ending. Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know there was an alternate ending until I think like a couple days ago. So
yeah, it's just, I thought, you know, it's a nice little thing. And I like that when an ending perhaps adds on versus like maybe not having critical information and then hiding it in a true ending. I don't like it when studios do that. So I appreciated that it was like a supplementary thing that did not seeing it didn't make me feel, you know, didn't make me feel bad. It was just like a bonus when I did realize it was there.
Oh, very nice. I love it.
Yeah. So any final thoughts? I guess this is our second game we've finished together. Heck yes.
Hey.
I'm curious, just final thoughts on the game itself. Kind of what are you coming away with after playing this title?
I think for me as like I'll answer this as a gamer first, which is I think I'm very quick to write off games when their mechanics do not meet the style of game I am immediately drawn to. And I think this is one of those gems that has shown me that it's like, if you allow yourself to experience the story and like understand what the creator's intentions are, it's a great way to find appreciation even in like game types and mechanics that you are not really drawn to. As a gamer, that I think was a really important takeaway for me.
Yeah.
As a human who is constantly dealing with his own personal baggage and new baggage that gets dropped off at my doorstep, or that I'm packing myself, I think having a reminder that it is important to check in with yourself and notice what my therapist tells me to do, like find patterns of behaviors that are and are not serving you, and then figure out like, well, where did those patterns start from? I think that's such an important part of, at least in my own life, my own practice, it's been an important part of understanding moments from my past and behaviors in my present and how they are interconnected. And I think this game was a really important chance to live into that.
Yep.
How about you?
Oh, man. I think I really appreciated, because this is the first title that we've been able to get the context, like you mentioned, with talking with Damas. I think having that context really grounded a lot of my appreciation and understanding of the game itself. And it made me really firmly believe in and excited for all of the titles we'll be able to do that with, because I think just as a whole and as, co-organizer of this club, it's really important to me that we find ways to contextualize the media we consume.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think this, more than our last month's selection, because we didn't have that interview, right? We didn't talk with the developer. It really made me appreciate sort of this hope and goal that we've come into with this club. So from that sort of meta perspective there, but as a player of this game, I just really appreciated the vulnerability in which they created this story and the way that they shared this part of themselves. Like this is a game nobody else could have made. This is a game that is so specific, and in that it became, I think it's maybe one of my favorite games that I've played in a long time because of the specificity.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that it did allow for us to reflect on what it means to have aspirations and goals and plan for the future. And in what ways can we do so that maybe are less stressful to ourselves, I guess, to put it mildly.
Oofa-doofa. That's a good one. That's a good one. Real quick, I think that last comment reminds me, like, Neil Gaiman has an essay that he writes about how if you are a creative, it can feel overwhelming to create, because it's like, well, everything's been said before. And the thesis of this particular piece is that, like, no one has your voice. And so as long as you are writing something that is kind of true to you, then you are writing something that's never been written before, or you're building or making something that's never been made before. And your last statement just like really reminded me of that. So if you find yourself on the fence about creation and the value of your voice, no one else has got it. So
just do it.
Yeah, just do it.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful note to end on for today.
Yes, I think so too.
Yeah, good closing statement there.
Yes, housekeeping things.
Yes, for folks interested, we are going to be starting up our next game at the first week of the month. I'm not going to say the date because I do not have a calendar in front of me. But if you are interested in joining this club and participating in the Discord community and looking at the discussion questions that we do newsletters for, all of the above, please just find us at geeksandgrounds.com. That's where everything is housed, and you can click through and sign up for the newsletter and get those in your inbox every Tuesday. And you can find us on social media at Geeks and Grounds on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. I believe those are the big three that we're on. I think technically we have a TikTok. We have not posted anything on there yet.
Nothing on there yet. No. But we'll get there someday.
But we'll get there. And if you want to follow that too, feel free.
Yeah.
We're working our way up. So that is that housekeeping. Just make sure to sign up. I guess, where can folks find you if they're interested in hanging out outside of the club?
Find me at My Grand Falloon. Looking forward to chatting with y'all. And a special shout out to everyone who contributed to the Discord over the last several weeks. It has been so fun getting to chat with everyone and like hear people's perspectives on this. And we also have like a monthly conversation.
Yeah,
what is it?
monthly hangout.
A hangout.
It's the last. This is a convoluted statement that I swear does make sense. It is the last Saturday of the full week of the month.
That's right.
Yeah.
The last Saturday.
But again,
of
if
the
you
full week of the month.
But if you follow the newsletter,
it's all in there.
It's going to be in there, and that is probably the easier way to figure it out.
Last time we had a handful of people that were able to hop on. We all talked with them live. So people hopped on like the virtual stage and shared some of their experiences. It was a really great time. We'd love to hear from you on this game as well. So just go to geeksandgrounds.com. Easiest way to find all the information for all of this and all the context for how to sign up for everything.
Yes. And actually, I realized I have a phone in my hands
Oh.
and I can look at a calendar. So for anyone interested, because we're going to post this before the Hangout.
Mm-hmm.
So if anyone wants to hop in the Discord and join the Hangout live, that is going to be on March 25th at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. So again, if you listen to this podcast and it is not yet March 25th, 2023, you can hop into the Discord and join us for a live chat. It's for an hour. It's just us hanging out and sharing thoughts, as Joel said. And yeah, honestly, this community is definitely like my bucket list of little ordinary joys. I think this is extraordinary. I don't think this is ordinary, but this community and this club is definitely one of my joys. So,
yes, absolutely.
So
It's been
thank you,
incredible.
Joel.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Where can people find you, Jenny?
Folks can find me on Twitch, TikTok, and YouTube at Kimchica. And they, again, mostly can find me on the Geeks and Grounds stuff because that's kind of where I'm putting a lot of attention at this point in time.
So last month,
Mm-hmm.
we thought we had the perfect closing statement, but we have a new one.
We do?
We will always.
Oh,
and
my goodness.
Are we ready for this?
I am. Dun, 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 dun.
Don't be nerds in the air. Be geeks on the ground. This has been Geeks and Grounds.
That's amazing.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Bye.